To get Missing Vibes as your skiza tune, dial *811 *924#.
Skiza na Nation.
Kuna mbomu
15 pounds.
nachukua mbomu.
Zinakwenda. Nahitaji diaper.
Kimeumana.
39 40,000 shillings.
Namba 3.
King Kong.
Na
50,000 Kenya
Grand Mega This is NTV.
1 2 3 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10.
na Nicholas Wambua.
Dakta mtazamaji, na kukaribisha ukaya kitako kuanzia sasa hadi tamati. Naitwa Nicholas Wambua, mwenzangu huluga ishara ni Flora Atieno. Taarifa kamili. Baada ya kufoka kwenye mitandao ya kijamii, hatimaye vijana wa kizazi kipya wameandaa maandamano aina yake. Maandamano ya siku ya Jumanne kupinga mswada wa fedha mwaka 2024 yalikuwa tofauti na maandamano ya hapo nyuma, kwani wanasiasa hawakuwepo kabisa katika maandamano hayo. Suala hili limezua mjadala kuhusu mwamko mpya katika upinzani dhidi ya sera za serikali, huku maafisa wa polisi wakirejelea mbinu duni za kuwanyanyasa waandamanaji ambao hawakujihami. Hii ni taarifa ambayo inaandaliwa na mwenzangu Melita Oletenges ambayo utakuwa unaipata muda si mrefu. Na mtazamaji, katika maandamano ya leo maafisa wa polisi wamewajeruhi wanahabari kadhaa na makumi ya waandamanaji wamekamatwa. Wanahabari wetu walikita kambi kona zote za mji wa Nairobi, na studioni ni naye Brian Mushiri ambaye alikuwa akiripoti akiwa kwenye maandamano hayo, na vilevile amekuwa kwenye vituo kadhaa vya polisi kushuhudia hali. Mushiri, karibu sana kwenye NTV jioni. Hebu tufahamishe pengine ni yapi ambayo umeyashuhudia katika maandamano ya siku ya leo?
Shukran sana Nick kutoka upande wa pili wa studio. Imekuwa ni siku ambayo tulianza tu kama kawaida, tulifika katika ikulu ya rais hapa jijini Nairobi, na baadaye sasa ikawa maandamano yameanza mida ya saa 4:30 hivi saa 5, na eneo la kwanza ambalo tuliona limeanza kuchacha ni hapa nje ya jumba letu la Nation Center katika barabara ya Kimathi Street, na waandamanaji wakaanza kutembea kuelekea bunge. Tukapitia njia ya pale Mwindi Mbingu Street tukielekea bunge, lakini tulipofika katika kanisa Katoliki la Holy Family Basilica, waandamanaji walipatana na maafisa wa polisi ambao waliwarushia vitoa machozi, na pia gari lile ambalo huwa linatapika maji likaondolewa ama likaletwa kukumbana na waandamanaji hapo. Na hapo ndipo tuliona majeruhi ya kwanza, yale makubwa kabisa katika maandamano haya. Mwanahabari wetu, mpiga picha mwenzetu Maureen Mureithi aliumizwa, na wengi waliumizwa kwa sababu gari hilo lilitapika maji kuwatawanya waandamanaji, na hata maafisa wa polisi hawakujali waandishi wa habari, hawakujali waandamanaji ambao hawakuwa wamejihami. Nick,
haya na maandamano ambayo tumeshuhudia awali ya saa kiongozwa na upande wa upinzani imekuwa ni gani leo?
Tofauti ambayo niliiona leo ni kwamba jambo la kwanza ni kwamba hakukuwa na wanasiasa, hakukuwa na wale ambao huwa wanaongoza, wale ambao tumezoea kama kutoka upande wa upinzani. Wale wanasiasa ambao tumewaona tu ni sasa hivi baadaye kabisa, mbunge wa Embakasi Mashariki Babu Owino pamoja na katibu wa chama cha Jubilee walifika pale katika kituo cha polisi cha Central kujaribu tu kuwatetea wale ambao walikuwa wamekamatwa. Lakini hawa vijana walijawa na hamaki, wako na nguvu, walikimbiza maafisa wa polisi takriban saa karibu 6-7 hivi, kutoka saa 4:30 saa 4 hivi hadi saa 10, na hata tulipoondoka pale katika kituo cha polisi cha Central bado walikuwa pale wakipiga kelele. Wanasema wenzao wamefungiwa mle ndani Central Police Station na hawatoki hapo, lazima watoke nao.
Asante sana Brian Mushiri, bila shaka anatupa tena kwa kiduchu tu mambo ambayo yameshuhudia nyanjani kwa siku ya leo kuhusiana na maandamano hayo. Mtazamaji, waandamanaji wa maandamano ya leo ya Occupy Parliament walitawanywa kwa vitoza machozi na polisi walipokusanyika kupinga mswada tata wa fedha ambao umezua ghadhabu nchini kote. Magunga Williams ambaye alijitokeza kujiunga na maandamano hayo anasimulia siku yake ilivyokwenda kuanzia asubuhi na kutoa taswira kamili ya matarajio yake ya maandamano hayo na masuala muhimu kuhusiana na hali ya kiuchumi. Mtazamaji, hiyo ni taarifa ambayo tutakuwa tunaipata muda si mrefu. Turejelee taarifa yetu ya kwanza kabisa, mtazamaji, ambapo baada ya kufuka kwenye mitandao ya kijamii, hatimaye vijana wa kizazi kipya wameandaa maandamano aina yake. Maandamano ya siku ya Jumanne kupinga mswada wa fedha wa mwaka 2024 ilikuwa tofauti kabisa na maandamano ya hapo nyuma, kwani wanasiasa hawakuwepo kabisa katika maandamano hayo. Swala hili limezua mjadala kuhusu mwamko mpya katika upinzani dhidi ya sera za serikali, huku maafisa wa polisi wakirejelea mbinu duni za kuwanyanyasa waandamanaji ambao hawakujihami. Mtazamaji, mwanahabari wetu Melita Oletenges sasa anatuarifu.
Waandamanaji walijitokeza katika barabara tofauti jijini Nairobi. Hali ya mguu ponye ilishuhudiwa, polisi wakiwatawanya waandamanaji ambao hawakuwa wamejihami. Wanahabari pia hawakusamehewa katika maandamano ambayo yaliwaacha wanahabari kadhaa wakiwa wamejeruhiwa, ikiwemo mpiga picha wa NTV Maureen Moreithi. Hali hiyo ya mshike ilishuhudiwa mchana kutwa. Mamia ya waandamanaji walikamatwa na maafisa wa polisi katika barabara tofauti jijini Nairobi. Biashara kadhaa pia zilisalia kufungwa jijini kutokana na vurugu hiyo. Hata hivyo, kilichojitokeza wazi ni kwamba waandamanaji waliojitokeza kwa wingi ni wale wa kizazi kipya cha Gen Z, kinyume na maandamano ya hapo nyuma. Wanasiasa wa upinzani ambao wanafahamika kuendesha maandamano hayo pia hawakuweko. Taswira hiyo ni ukurasa mpya katika kupinga sera za serikali.
I don't understand, but si right. Juu hapa hakuna mtu amerusha mtu mawe. Hapa hakuna mtu ameenda kuiba. Hakuna mtu ameenda kuvunja duka ya mtu. No, we are protesting peacefully. Wao ndio wameanza na shida. Wameanza kurusha tear gas hapa na pale.
Always tax country to success. So sisi kama young adults wenye tuko karibu kubeba hiyo responsibility. History inatuuma. Juu maparo wetu washakapitia hata wana nguvu ya kukua hapa.
Whatever life I want to have, I want it to be good and favorable for me and other people around me and my small siblings, that they may have a good life growing up.
Kauli mbiu kutoka kwao ni kwamba mswada wa fedha mwaka 2024 utawanyanyasa wa Kenya, na hawakusita kupinga uongozi wa Rais Ruto. Hata hivyo, azma yao ya kufika bungeni iliambulia patupu, kwani walizuiliwa na maafisa wa polisi waliokita kambi bungeni. Melita Oletenges, NTV.
Na mtazamaji, hii ni simulizi ya Magunga Williams ambaye alikuwa kwenye maandamano hayo.
Our goal today was to occupy Parliament because there was a reading of the finance bill today. They were presenting the bill, and because I was part of the group that was opposing it, we wanted to have our voices heard all the way to Parliament. But when we arrived, of course, it was cordoned off. There was a heavy police presence. We kept picketing and shouting and, basically passing on the message that we are rejecting the finance bill completely in its entirety. But that also didn't last long because this time, the more we were, the heavier the police presence and the nastier the reaction, So they started hitting people, throwing tear gas, and this time they came out with this huge water tank that sprays people. And unfortunately, I was caught up in between running and helping somebody, and the water tank found me, by the road, and we were sprayed down. But today, as opposed to what people are used to seeing, people didn't throw stones. There was no threat to anybody on the streets. We stayed true to our cause, which was to, let the MPs know that we were rejecting the finance bill as it was presented. It is kind of funny that people expect Gen Z, the people who are just after high school, the much younger generation, to not be concerned about politics. But then history tells us otherwise. The likes of Tom Mboya were trade unionists by the age of 20. People, our heroes started their struggles when they were quite young. They did not start when they were 40 or 30. So it does not actually come out as a surprise to me that young people are the ones who are leading this charge. We will continue the fight. We would rather be doing other things, by the way, but there are things that you cannot ignore. So when we will be called upon to come back, we will be back.
Bila shaka mtazamaji, mazungumzo zaidi na Williams atakuwa hapo mwendo wa saa 3 katika sehemu ya 12 minutes. Maswali zaidi yameibuka baada ya mapendekezo mapya ya afueni kwenye mswada wa fedha mwaka 2024. Maswali kama vile, ni vipi serikali itasawazisha hesabu zake ikizingatiwa kuwa malengo ya mapato bado yamesalia kama yalivyokuwa kabla ya mapendekezo ya leo. Aidha, baadhi ya mapendekezo yanahitaji kurekebishwa kwa sheria zingine kabla ya kuziafikia. Ibrahim Karanja anaarifu.
Hatua ya serikali kulegeza kamba kuhusu baadhi ya vigezo kwenye mswada wa kifedha wa mwaka 2024 huenda ukaashiria afueni ya muda, japo imeibua maswali mengi zaidi kuhusu utekelezwaji wa mapendekezo hayo mapya na kutoa uwezekano wa serikali inayotoa kwa mkono wa kulia na kuchukua kwa mkono wa kushoto. Ushuru wa magari kwa mfano ulinuia kuipa serikali shilingi bilioni 58.02 zaidi kama ushuru, na kutolewa kwake kungelazimu aidha makadirio ya matumizi yapunguzwe kwa kiwango hicho ama salio kwenye bajeti liongezeke kwa kiwango sawia, na Kuria Kimani hakuwa wazi kuhusu kitakachofuata. Lakini zipo njia mbadala za matozo ambazo serikali ya Kenya Kwanza imetumia ili kusawazisha hesabu zake, ikizingatiwa kuwa malengo ya mapato kutokana na mswada huo wa kifedha wa mwaka 2024 yamesalia kuwa shilingi bilioni 3.2 kama yalivyokuwa awali. Kwa mfano, tayari kuna pendekezo la kuongeza ushuru wa mafuta kwa shilingi 7 na kufanya shilingi 25 kwa kila lita kutoka shilingi 18, huku ushuru wa kuagiza bidhaa kutoka nje ikidhamiriwa kuwa 3.5% kutoka 2.5%. Ushuru wa reli pia unalengwa. Inachofanya serikali katika matukio haya ni kuondoa makali ya ushuru kupitia mswada tata wa kifedha wa mwaka 2024 na kusawazisha hesabu kupitia sheria na matozo ambazo hazitazua joto mno, kwani hazifuatiliwi na wengi. Lakini hata kwenye afueni zilizotangazwa leo na mwenyekiti wa kamati ya kifedha bungeni, mbunge wa Molo Kuria Kimani, yapo maswali ibuka. Kwanza, ni vipi ushuru wa VAT unaondolewa kwenye biashara ndogo za chini ya shilingi milioni 1 kwa mwaka iwapo sehemu ya 16 ya sheria ya mapato, yani income tax, iliyoweka ushuru huo hakijabadilishwa? Ni ipi hatma ya mapendekezo hayo ikizingatiwa kuwa sehemu ya 23 ya sheria ya taratibu za ushuru, yani Tax Procedures Act, inayolazimu uwepo wa e-teams haijabadilishwa? Kuondolewa kwa VAT kwa mkate kuna maanisha nini kwa msimamo wa serikali kwamba ni bidhaa za kuelekezwa nje ya nchi, yani exports, ambazo tu zinastahiki kuondolewa ushuru au zero rating? Yote 9. 10 ni kwamba kitakachofuata bungeni kwenye siku zilizosalia ndicho kitakuwa msema kweli kuhusu hali ya halisi ya mstakabali huu. Ibrahim Karanja, NTV.
Na ripoti ya kamati ya fedha kuhusiana na mswada wa fedha wa mwaka 2024 wasilishwa bungeni leo jioni, na wabunge wataanza kuijadili hapo kesho Jumatano asubuhi hadi saa 3:30 usiku. Mjadala huo utaendelea siku ya Alhamisi asubuhi na kisha bunge wataweza kupiga kura Alhamisi mwendo wa dhuhuri. Wabunge wanahitajika kuwasilisha mapendekezo ya marekebisho yao kufikia Alhamisi saa 7 mchana kabla ya kura hiyo. Kisha awamu ya mwisho ya kura itakayojumuisha marekebisho yatakayoidhinishwa itafanyika Jumanne wiki ijayo mwendo wa dhuhuri.
Those of you who want to file any amendments, and I've seen some, I've in fact approved some, although it will be more decent and proper to file your amendments after reading the report to see whether you are proposing amendments that have already been dealt with by the committee. I have directed the clerk that the closure for submitting amendments will be on Thursday at 1 p.m.
Mtazamaji, baada ya taarifa hiyo naomba nipate mapumziko mafupi, lakini muda si mrefu. Katika maisha sasa leo, mabadiliko ya tabia nchi yamewalazimu wakulima huko Kinango kukuza mimea tofauti ili kujipatia riziki. Mtazamaji, tutakuwa tunazamia swala hilo na saa kilimo cha tunda hili ambalo linafahamika kama, bila shaka, tree. Nitakuwafahamisha jina kamili.
2022. Today we're on Happy Kenya Clean Toilet Mission. And we're visiting Mama Zawadi live in Nairobi. Come with me. Selena! Mama Zawadi, how do you keep your toilets clean?
I use normal detergent and bleach for washing.
The detergent and bleach cleanless can leave behind yellowness, rust, and germs. Harpic's 10 times better cleaning compared to regular detergents and bleach, and kills 99.9% illness-causing germs in your toilet, including the COVID-19 virus.
Wow, Selena! Nimeamini sasa!
Really? Yes! Now that she's part of the mission, the next house is yours.
Mortein Doom, with its trusted formulation, it provides protection in seconds. So spread the Mortein Doom message of how we, you and I, can fight to end malaria. Number one choice.
Countries across the world are currently grappling with climate change, a situation that has greatly contributed to frequent and severe droughts in Kenya, negatively affecting livelihoods, ecosystems, and the economy. As a way of mitigating this challenge, the government of Kenya has continued to implement drought resilience and climate adaptation measures to reduce vulnerability and exposure. The National Drought Management Authority, NDMA, is mandated to coordinate the management of drought risk in the country with the view to preventing their slide into emergencies.
Karibu mtazamaji kwenye sehemu ya maisha sasa. Tunda hilo linafahamika kama tree tomato. Kwa miaka sasa wakulima eneo la Kinango, kaunti ya Nyandarua wamesifika kuwa na mchanga wenye rutuba na viwango vya mvua vya kustawisha kilimo. Ila sasa mabadiliko ya tabia nchi yamewalazimu wakulima hao kukuza mimea tofauti ili kupata riziki. Mwanahabari wetu wa sayansi na afya Bridget Ngana alikuwa Nyandarua, naye hapa ni taarifa yake katika maisha sasa.
Sara na Ronald Gadhitu ni wakulima wa mboga hapa Munyaka, Kinangop Kusini. Walikuwa wamepanda matunda aina ya tree tomato kwenye shamba hili la ekari 2, lakini robo 3 ya mimea hiyo iliangamizwa na baridi kali.
Tulikuwa tumepanda seedlings 3800, lakini juu ya kiangazi na hiyo frost yenye ilikuwa inaaguka mwezi wa pili, ndio hiyo matunda yote ikachomeka na ikaisha, isipokuwa yenye unaona imebaki moja moja huku nyuma. Hiyo miaka ya kitabo kumekuwa na frost, lakini hatujaipata frost kama yenye imekuwa this year. Hiyo frost ya this year imekuwa extreme, imekuwa zaidi, kwa sababu hiyo ilikuwa inakuja every day, every night. Mkiamka mnaacha kulikuwa kumechomeka, kesho mnakuja mnapata ingine zaidi. So ilikuwa kubwa zaidi ya vile tumezoea.
So unaona the one which was affected. So
mmea wa tree tomato ni mpya katika eneo hili la nyanda za juu, lakini kutokana na mabadiliko ya tabia nchi, hali ya anga hapa sasa inaufaa mmea huu, na wakulima kama Sara na Ronald wanaopanda ili kuimarisha mapato yao, ingawa wanakadiria hasara kutokana na hali ya anga.
Nilianza kupanda miti kutoka hiyo side kuzunguka hivyo, sababu mahali kulikuwa na miti niliona hiyo matunda haikuafektiwa sana, na ndio yenye ilibaki.
Kitu ile muhimu sana ukulima bila maji huwezi. Kwa sababu sasa wakati kama huu maji ni zaidi, hata tunaangalia njia ya kuondoa kwa shamba. Lakini kama time ya drought, hiyo wakati wa drought bakwe uwe umehifadhi maji wakati kama huu.
Zablon Ngumi pia amekuza tree tomato shambani mwake Kahuruko, Kinangop Kaskazini. Anatueleza kuwa tangu aanze kuishi hapa miaka 48 iliyopita, hakutathmini atakuza mimea mingine kando na viazi, karoti na kabeji zinazokuzwa kwa wingi hapa.
Na wakati kulikuwa na misitu mingi, huwa ilikuwa nyingi sana na ilikuwa inatusaidia sana wakati wa mlimo. Lakini wakati ilikatwa yote kamalizika, kulikuwa kuna sawmill nyingi sana hapa. Nyingi zikakata ikaisha. Na ilipoisha sasa ikawa nao jua inaingia. Unaona sasa climate imeharibika sana. Sasa una kilimo nayo inakuwa ni shinda. Tree tomatoes inafanya vizuri sababu inatoa mazao Kila mwaka ukivuna tuseme kama ni mara moja unaweza kupata kama kilo tuseme kama 100 au tuseme kilo kama 1000 kwa mfano. Na wao wanakununua kama 80 shillings. Sasa imagine, sasa unaona ukivuna hivyo utapata pesa za kusaidia.
Kinangop imepakana na milima ya Aberdare, moja ya chemichemi za maji nchini, ila msitu wa Aberdare umeathiriwa na ukataji wa miti ovyo ovyo. Ila sasa wakazi wanashirikiana na shirika la huduma za misitu KFS katika kutunza miti iliyopandwa na wao kukuza vyakula.
Sisi tulikuwa watu wabaya sana kwa uharibu wa misitu juu ya ukosefu wa kasi. Sasa ndio tulikuwa tunaonelea lazima uende kwa kichaka ndio upate riziki ya jioni.
Kwa hii broko yenye tuko hapa ni kama ekari 70. Sisi tunagawanya kwa household juu ndio kila familia ipate kiasi ya kupata chakula na kupata kitu ya kuuza. Na tuko kama household 140. Wakati tulipanda hii miti ilipadiwa na Kenya Forest Service, hatukuwa tumelima. Ilianza kukauka yenyewe. Kulikuwa na maji mingi, ikaanza kukauka. Ndio tulikaribishwa na KFS, tukaambiwa ni lazima tushirikiane ili tuchunge hii miti. Ikikauka tuna replace. Sasa imekuwa 100% germination. Imeshikilia kabisa, hakuna mti unaweza kauka.
Almost close to 70,000 seedlings on farm.
Kulingana na shirika la Worldwide Fund for Nature Kenya, juhudi za kumaliza njaa chini ya maendeleo endelevu nambari 2 ni kuimarisha mazao na mapato ya wakulima wadogo, na wakulima hapa sasa wameraiwa kupanda miti ya mbao shambani mwao.
Niko na miti 1670 na nimepanda kwa mashamba tofauti. Kwa miaka hiyo ingine inakuja, badala kwenda kwa forest sana, tutakuwa tukipata mbao hapa na tutakuwa tukipata mali mingi kwa hii miti. Ukikata wakati miti itakuwa, wewe utavuna na utauza na utakuwa na pesa zako. Hii Kinangop limeisha takuzaliwa, lakini wakati mwingi sana unakuta hata majani zingine zinakuja kukufa tu juu ya hiyo hewa. Lakini sasa watu wakipanda miti mingi, zote tupande miti, hiyo majani inakufa hivi juu ya nini ya hiyo climate, itarudi noma.
Kupandwa kwa miti katika shamba za wakazi hapa Nyandarua ni njia moja ya jamii na wadau katika sekta ya mazingira kujaribu kupunguza ile kuingia kwa watu kwenye msitu wa Aberdare ambao ni chemichemi muhimu sana ya maji hapa nchini. Bridget Ngana, NTV, Nyandarua.
Je, wajua kwamba tunda la tree tomato linafahamika kama ebitomasi au tunda damu kwa Kiswahili? Tunda hili lina faida chungu nzima na hutibu magonjwa mbalimbali kama vile shinikizo la damu, kisukari. Tunda hili pia husaidia kupunguza uzani, kulainisha ngozi, kuongeza damu mwilini na kupunguza magonjwa ya moyo. Mti wa tunda hili huishi kwa miaka 5 hadi 12. Mti wa tunda damu ni binafsi, haupendi magugu, na hivyo basi mlazimisha mkulima kuupalilia ipasavyo mara kwa mara. Sasa umejua.
Lakini vile hii ekonomi imetufinya, ilinibidi kubadilisha sabuni nikatumia ingine rahisi. Bala, ilibidi nioshe kila kitu mara 2. Sikuwa na otherwise, nikarudia Ariel.
Ariel, usafi bora kwa mwosho mmoja tu.
How do you keep your toilet clean?
I use normal detergent and bleach for washing.
The detergent and bleach cleanless can leave behind yellowness, rust, and germs. Harpic's 10 times better cleaning compared to regular detergents and bleach, and kills 99.9% illness-causing germs in your toilet, including the COVID-19 virus.
Imperfections, blackheads. Try Garnier's Pure Active 3-in-1 Charcoal, powered by salicylic acid and purified charcoal to reduce pimple-causing germs by 99.5%. One product, 3 uses for a pure skin. Garnier Pure Active 3-in-1 Charcoal, #1 in South Africa, by Garnier Naturally.
Did you know that malaria is a top 10 cause of death in Kenya, with over 10,000 Kenyans dying every year from malaria? And the reason being a mosquito. We believe protection and prevention is the best cure in the fight to end malaria.
Mortain Doom with its trusted formulation. It provides protection in seconds. So spread the Mortain Doom message of how we, you and I, can fight to end malaria. Mortain Doom, Kenya's #1 choice.
Karibu tena. Wakenya wengi wamelalamikia kucheleweshwa kwa haki baada ya mahakama kufungwa leo katika sehemu mbalimbali nchini. Kizungumkuti kiliwakumba Wakenya wengi kufuatia maombolezo ya Monica Kivuti ambaye ni hakimu katika mahakama ya Makadara. Aidha, kesi zote zimeahirishwa hadi siku ya Jumanne wiki ijayo. Fatuma Bugu anaarifu.
Dominic Vasi alifunga safari yake kutoka Embu hadi Mombasa kwa azma ya kufuatilia kesi inayomhusu katika mahakama ya Mombasa, ila alipigwa na butwaa kupata koti imefungwa kufuatia maombolezo ya hakimu Monica Kivuti.
Nimelala huko Mombasa, bado kesi leo imesikika iweze endelea. Sasa mambo hiyo gharama maisha venye iko kwenda Embu kurudi tena, unaambiwa kuja kama kesho itakuwa ngumu.
Jua mlikuwa mmekuja ili mkaweze kusikiza kesi zenu, lakini siku ya leo kesi zenu hazitaweza kuendelea.
Tangazo hili lilimvunja moyo, akaomba kuongezewa siku ya kusikizwa kwa kesi yake.
Wanipe siku ya mbali kidogo sababu uwezo wa kuja na kurudi pia sina.
Hatukupata clear information. Kwa leo hakuna kesi.
Taswira sawia na hiyo ilishuhudiwa Limuru, huku waliokuwa wamefika kwa huduma za mahakama wakilazimika kurudi bila msaada.
Naomba isikawie ndio niweze kupata haki.
Mombasa waliona kesi za dharura pekee wanasaidika, ila kuanzia kesho. Haya yanajiri huku mahakimu, mawakili na wafanyikazi wa mahakama wakijumuika sehemu mbalimbali nchini kuomboleza mwenzao Monica Kivuti.
Every day we are at risk of being killed, of being injured, of being attacked.
Koome alisema kuwa idara ya mahakama itashirikiana na Wizara ya Usalama wa Ndani na Inspekta Mkuu wa Polisi kuongeza maafisa zaidi wa polisi mahakamani, kadhalika kuongeza rasilimali za mahakama.
The security across the judiciary will remain a priority and will be reinforced to protect the sanctity of courtrooms.
Fatuma Bugu, NTV, Mombasa.
Karibu michezoni. Ijapokuwa majaribio ya riadha ya mashindano ya Olimpiki yalitamatika siku ya Jumamosi na timu itakayowakilisha Kenya kutajwa, bado kuna uwezekano wa wanariadha takriban 5 kujiunga na timu ikiwa wataweza kupata muda wa kufuzu. Katibu mkuu wa kamati ya Olimpiki ya Kenya Francis Mutuku amefichua kuwa kamati ya Olimpiki itahakikisha kwamba wamewasaidia wanariadha hao kufuzu.
And provide any competition they can be able to get invitations to, and in collaboration with Athletics Kenya we are trying to get them events which they can be able to go and compete at the same time. We know a number of them will go for the African Championship, which is due in a few days time. We are hoping that they can be able to go and get the qualifying time. Our wish as a National Olympic Committee is that we have more athletes qualify. We are between now and the 30th of June. There are possibilities. We believe some of them were very, very close. Given a few days training, given another opportunity to compete, we believe they can be able to attain the required time.
Na baada ya kukamilika kwa kombe la Afrika la tenisi la wanawake la kundi la 3 la Billie Jean King jijini Nairobi juma lililopita, Kenya sasa inaelekeza macho yake kote kwa kombe la Afrika la wanaume la kundi la 4 la Davis nchini Angola mnamo Juni 19 hadi 22. Kenya itawakilishwa na wachezaji Albert Njogu, Derek Ominde, ndugu wakazi wa Amerika Kyle Shah na Kin Shah wa 19 na mkazi wa Australia Ibrahim Kibet 28. Chini ya kocha George Oyo, timu ya Kenya itawania tiketi moja mezani ya kupandishwa ngazi hadi kundi la 3 dhidi ya Angola, Algeria, Burundi, Cameroon, Jamhuri ya Kidemokrasia ya Kongo, Rwanda na Senegal ugani kukoksi Villas. Na kocha Ureno Roberto Martinez amesema kuwa amebeba nguo za kutosha hadi mwisho wa Euro mwaka huu, huku akiwa na imani kuwa timu yake iko na uwezo wa kuibuka washindi. Timu ya Ureno itaanza safari yake leo dhidi ya Jamhuri ya Czech kuanzia saa 4 usiku. Ureno ndio timu pekee iliyoshinda michezo yao yote ya kufuzu na ilifunga mabao mengi kuliko timu nyingine, huku ikijivunia rekodi bora ya ulinzi baada ya kufungwa mara 2 pekee. Itakuwa mshangao mkubwa ikiwa Czech ambao walishinda mechi 4 kati ya 8 za kufuzu na ushindi mara 2 kati ya hizo dhidi ya visiwa vya Faroe wataweza kupata matokeo ya kushangaza.
Into the national team just by having a name. Cristiano scored 51 goals in 50 games. Consistency that he had in his club, in his league. I can only say that Cristiano's in the national team in merit, and probably the numbers are there to back that up.
Rush to say we're the main favourites in the competition. At least I assumed it in that way, the question. I don't think we are, but obviously a very good team, and we have the potential to be very dangerous in the competition, but it will all be down to how we'll grow in the competition.
Bila shaka mtazamaji, baada ya maandamano kuhusiana na mswada wa fedha kwa siku ya leo na mswada wenyewe kuwasilishwa na kusoma kwa mara ya kwanza katika bunge la kitaifa, basi mwenzangu Julian Zamboko katika Business Redefined na mwana yuko tayari pamoja na wageni wake kumradhi wachanganuzi wa masuala ya fedha atakuwa na kupambanulia tena kwa kina zaidi kuhusiana na hatua za mbele, hasa kuanzia siku ya Jumatano, hapo ni kesho, na vile vile Alhamisi ambapo kura itaanza kupigwa kwa ajili ya kupitisha au kuangusha mswada huu katika bunge la kitaifa. Japo Julian ananiambia kwamba uwezekano wa kuangusha mswada huu kidogo ni finyu sana. Basi nafungia hapo taarifa zetu za NTV jioni. Naitwa Nicholas Wambua, panapo majaliwa naomba tupatane siku ya kesho. Mwenzangu Hulugo Ishara, imekuwa ni Flora Atieno. Alamsiki.
This is NTV.
In Kenya, the Nature Conservancy has been working with partners to conserve our country's natural resources, including watersheds that provide clean water to millions, fertile soil to grow crops, mangroves that absorb carbon and protect our coastlines, and wildlife that fuels our tourism industry. We're building on more than a decade of successful partnerships for conservation in Kenya for people and nature. Learn more at nature.org/Kenya. Together, we find a way.
Introducing a new range of Royco spices. An explosion of rich, authentic taste. Spicika na Royco. Making those good meals great.
Nivea Pearl and Beauty Deodorant. The perfect balance of 48-hour protection and care for soft, smooth, and beautiful underarms. Try our new Pearl and Beauty Black Pearl for smooth and perfumed underarms.
Garissa University takes great pride in the excellence of its academic programs and graduates. The University Council, Board of Management, Senate, staff and students of Garissa University request the pleasure of your presence during the 5th graduation ceremony for the conferment of degrees and diplomas by the Chancellor on Thursday 20th June from 7 a.m. The chief guest will be His Excellency President William Samoei Ruto. Cabinet secretaries, principal secretaries, governors, members of parliament and other dignitaries will also grace the occasion. The theme for this graduation is Resilience in the Pursuit of Knowledge Through Adversity. We'll be live on NTV and streaming live on our social media platforms. Congratulations to the class of 2024. Garissa University, Oasis of Innovation.
What is Generation Z? Beyond age, it's a culture, laughter, and conversations that matter. Speaking of Gen Z podcast is back with Gen Z's finest, Esther Nyandoro, Jackie Masharia, and Michelle Namasaka. Tune in every Wednesday on Nation FM at 10 a.m. and stream your favorite episodes on nation.africa or www.ntvkenya.co.ke or wherever you get your podcasts. Speaking of Gen Z podcast, it's giving wholesome conversations.
To get my promise to you as your Skiza tune, dial *811 *925 #.
Skiza na Nation.
NTV, turning on your world.
Hey folks, what a day in the public finance sphere. We have seen pronouncements coming no other place than State House regarding proposed amendments, I should clarify, to the Finance Bill of 2024 in what looks like quite some considerable concessions coming from the state in the plan which targets to raise 346 billion shillings of additional tax revenue in the financial year 24-25. Of course, we've got a couple of questions there. We want to delve deep into that report and what are some of the things emerging from there and how do we plug the revenue holes now emerging. And to do that, I am joined on set by Stephen Dego from EY, that's Ernst & Young, where he's a specialist on indirect taxes, senior manager for that matter. Karibu sana, Steve.
Thank you, Julian.
I am joined by Wangoi Karuga, joining us from MAK and Partners, where she is a tax partner. Karibu sana.
Thank you so much, Julian.
Asante. And James Munili, tax director at PKF Eastern Africa. Karibu sana, James.
Asante, Julian.
Ladies and gentlemen, let us not waste any time. Let's delve deep into it. We did anticipate the report to be tabled today. We did not anticipate a briefing right at State House with pronouncements on what to expect. I should clarify, we haven't seen the report yet, but let's delve with what has been made public so far. Steve, motor vehicle tax, gone. Many of us thought it would be a restructuring of the proposal, gone entirely. This was meant to bake in 58 billion shillings into the revenue net in FY 24-25. What do you make of the change?
Thank you, Julian, again. I think the concession on motor vehicle tax, so to speak, in as much as it was not expected, I think it is a good move for the government to have considered. Remember, when we were doing the public participation, that is what came out in a big way. And that's what has had a lot of discussion and was in the mouths of almost every Kenyan. So for the government to have considered that and dropped that particular provision, I think it's a good move. I think the big question that we need to ask ourselves is, yes, there is a concession. And what is the reasoning behind getting that out of the way? As you have said, we were looking, or they were looking to get 58 billion Kenyan shillings out of it. Now that it's out of the way, where do we get that 58 billion now?
Yes. Well, let's get your introductory thoughts. And many of us said, look, it's a no-brainer. Motor vehicle tax just didn't align with Section 3 of the Income Tax Act because it prescribes what exactly is an income tax. But if you read the statement which came from State House, it looks like there are thoughts around a potential increase in the road maintenance levy. Would that be the way out?
Okay. Thank you so much, Julian, for that and for having me in your show.
So as Mr. Ndegwa here has said, it's a good reprieve for the public that the proposal for motor vehicle tax has been proposed to be removed. But the biggest thing was around it being an asset, subjecting an asset under the income tax. Correct. So not aligning itself to Section 3 of the Income Tax Act. And the big question also is, where is that money that was going to be derived from motor vehicle tax coming from? So to just put you into context, most of the, say, taxi hailing cars range between 800,000 to 1.2 million. So speaking to those drivers today, a number of them told me that their current insurance that they pay on a 1 million vehicle is around 70,000. If you levy in motor vehicles tax, it's going to be to come to around 30,000 for a 1 million vehicle. For a 800,000 vehicle, it will come to around 70 to 80,000. So that is very high for them. And now with the proposal to actually increase the road maintenance levy, sort of to cushion the funds that were to be derived from the motor vehicle tax, it's also a big thing, because today an article in Business Daily indicated that currently the fuel and levies account for 40% of the cost of fuel per litre in Kenya. Yeah. So for the petrol that retails at 1.89, fuel and levy account for around 79 shillings. And that broken down, the biggest chunk is VAT excise, immediately followed by road maintenance levy. Yeah. So if you're going to increase it, then we are going to actually increase the percentage of taxes and levies on fuel. Yes. In an economy that's already struggling, in an economy where the cost of fuel drives really all cost of production, and comparing that to a neighboring country in Uganda, where we have, say, 40% of our prices per litre accounting for fuels and levy, Uganda stands at 24-25% for petrol and diesel. So you can just see how the cost is still going to be high. Even substituting, say, motor vehicles tax with a proposed increase in road maintenance levy, it's still really going to hurt the economy.
I see. James, let's get your thoughts on what came from State House today. Were you surprised? It looks like quite a bit of clawback when it comes to the finance bill.
Yes, it was actually a surprise, Julian. Given what we've seen in the finance bill, given the extensive public participation, given the sort of change in profile on who we saw on the streets today, actually speaks a lot. Yeah. And I think technology has actually played a very key role in terms of sensitizing the public. I think the traditional way we've looked at it, where we've seen these protests being organized by politicians, there's a complete shift. You could actually see there is a complete change with the youth. And you'll actually notice over the past couple of years, there have been a lot of changes that have come in touching on the digital economy. That has been key. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've seen a lot of young people coming up to voice their concerns.
Yes.
Now, as to why I would actually call it a turnaround by the government, is it the pressure that has come from the events of today? We don't know. Is it the extensive views that the public gave with regards to the finance bill? Possibly. And you know what the government needs to understand is that it is dealing with a population now that is aware of these things. And I think what is driving this information is actually the digital age. And so it was completely unexpected. And it's not only about the motor vehicle tax. I think there are so many other proposals or rather statements that we've seen on some proposals that potentially will be reversed. We've not seen the report yet. And I think it's an anxious 2 days between now and Thursday, between tomorrow and Thursday, to actually see, will we see an actualization of what we had today? Yeah.
All right. Steve, let me come to you next, because one of my highlights in the pronouncements today from State House was e-TIMS. The Tax Procedures Act, Electronic Tax Invoice Regulations of 2023, dealing with the e-TIMS, had this contentious debate around, do we grant exemptions, do we not? And eventually, when you saw the final regulations, there was no exemption. But here's the state walking back and indicating that going forward, any business whose annual turnover falls below 1 million Kenya shillings, basically they took the TOT, turnover tax threshold, you won't be required to issue ATIMS invoices. What are your immediate thoughts on that?
It's quite interesting, Julians, that we are moving up and down. And if you look at the way that laws are made here in Kenya, unfortunately, we have seen a shift in terms of, and I'll give an example. Look at what happens with every year with VAT, the movement of supplies from one docket to the next.
Yeah.
I was hoping that we are not going to get there with ATIMS. But to your question, now the threshold that has been given, which is 1 million Kenya shillings, in terms of turnover, my assumption is that the 1 million is per calendar month, because that is what follows from a VAT perspective. But you realize ATIMS is no longer a VAT registered person's prerogative anymore. It's for everyone.
Yeah.
Now, when you give the threshold at 1 million Kenya shillings, I think we need to ask ourselves, what does it mean to that person whose turnover falls within the 1 million? Now, on the one hand, we have these big corporates or those that are above the 1 million, and the question would be, how do they verify?
Yeah.
How do they deal with this person who qualifies for this particular exemption? You and I know that, from a CIT perspective, nothing
CIT being
corporate income tax. Yes, sorry about that. You are not able to claim. You can't deduct. Expenses that are not backed up by an ATIMS compliant invoice. That is starting this year, January.
Yeah.
Now, for this particular person who has been exempted, I have raised my invoice. I am not required to comply. You are there, and you have had my invoice. The question is, now, how do I clarify? Whose burden will it be for that particular purpose? I think we need, and then number two, the threshold I feel is a bit low. Why don't we align it with the threshold for VAT, for example?
Yes.
Currently, if you look at the status of the economy and in terms of the revenues that most businesses are generating, 1 million in a month, you could be looking at not so many businesses, right? Now, and if you feel that this business and the invoice that is giving me is not ATIMS compliant, then it would leave me in a situation where I'm making a decision. Do I want to do business with these people?
Or not.
Or not.
Yeah.
So where have you left this particular person whom you had envisioned to cushion? So in the process of trying to cushion, I think you might end up throwing this person under the bus as far as compliance is concerned.
I see. A very good way to pivot now into Wangoi here. Is it possible to have the VAT threshold at 1 million shillings in turnover without a corresponding amendment to Section 16 of the Income Tax Act, which prescribes, as is indicated, that the only invoices which will be acceptable for income tax deductible purposes are those which are generated via ATIMS?
The proposal cannot operate in a vacuum. There has to be a series of amendments that should follow that proposal. My personal take on the threshold, of course, is that it is quite low. And the prudent thing to do is if the VAT registration threshold is 8 million, then it only follows that we apply ATIMS for VAT registered persons and say it is 8 million and above, and we remove anyone below the threshold of 8 million from ATIMS obligation. Of course, that will follow other series of amendments and probably even regulations to be issued. The ATIMS regulations that came about early this year, they didn't have a VAT, they didn't have a threshold.
Yes.
So we will have to amend those to include a threshold. Section 16 of the VAT Act that requires that a tax invoice has to be ATIMS generated. We'll have to make room to allow for the small, medium-sized and small businesses below the turnover to still issue manual invoices or whatever system they'll be onboarded on for KRA's visibility, because the idea behind ATIMS is real-time transmission of your sales so that the revenue authority is able to know how much you're making and also the corresponding deduction for whoever has made the purchase. So whatever is of administration and software that KRA can come up with to allow non-VAT registered persons or people below the 8 million threshold to still issue invoices and be transmitted to KRA, because the biggest issue is visibility and minimizing on VAT fraud. Also, we'll have to amend Section 24 that now of the Tax Procedures Act,
yes,
that prescribes that every business has to be on e-Teams. And even with the issue of every business and also gross turnover, we saw a lot of hue and cry, especially from people who own residential rental income, and they have already been slapped with assessments demanding that you also should be on e-Teams. So we expect that there should also be a change in that regard, so that whatever is carved out of the e-Teams threshold, so to speak, is carved out of the relevant legislations. Maybe along the same lines, now that we're discussing e-Teams, the finance bill proposed a 2 million penalty.
Per month?
Per month.
Yes, it's important to clarify that.
For non-compliance of electronic tax invoicing. So for businesses that you're expecting their turnover to be 1 million,
and the penalty is 2 million.
Pay 2 million in taxes for e-Teams offense. So again, we did not see that from the pronouncements that came out today, and we hope even as the National Assembly convenes on Thursday, that will be put into consideration so that penalty is not very high.
James, this question of the threshold as to whether it should be aligned with the VAT prescribed at 8 million, let me hold brief for the government. There's a reason why the turnover tax threshold, the floor, is at 1 million shillings. And the rationale behind their thinking, I would imagine, is if the turnover tax is designed for small businesses, it only makes sense that if we're creating an exemption window for small businesses under e-Teams, then they should be aligned. Isn't there a point there, James?
Yes, there's actually a point. And I choose to look at this discussion on e-Teams very differently. I'll still get to the issue of the threshold. And I think for the longest time, we've been advising government on this issue of the low levels of tax compliance. Yeah. I think that has been the biggest problem. And I think there are two terminologies that have always been used: hard to tax sectors, informal sector, and how really does the government get to these businesses. If you recall, a couple of years back, there was an attempt to introduce a single business license kind of tax. Presumptive tax, yes, at that particular point, to be able to get a hold of these small businesses. Now, to be honest, I think e-Teams is the way. And in as much as the compliance levels with e-Teams has not been that good, I still feel it is the solution to try and get to these hard to tax sectors. Yeah. And you see, when we talk of hard to tax sectors, in very simple terms, we're talking of sectors where the level of record keeping either is very low or does not exist. We are looking at sectors where the flow of money is in the form of cash. We're really looking at sectors that are not regulated in any way. And the reason I'm emphasizing that fact is it is very unfortunate that we have only about 7 million registered PINs. Yeah. Out of the 7 million, we are talking of about 4 million PINs that are actively filing and paying some form of tax. And in the 4 million, we are talking of individuals as well as corporate entities. Yes. And the 4 million is actually expected to raise enough tax revenue to support the entire Kenyan population. You can actually see where the problem lies. Yeah. So I think those levels are too low. And e-Teams is actually a way to actually bring guys to the net. The only problem is the way e-Teams in itself was rolled out. There are a lot of challenges, and you can imagine there are various ways you can raise an e-Teams invoice. You could either register for e-Teams, you generate your invoices online, you have your systems integrated, where you have your accounting systems generate the invoices, then linked to e-Teams, and you can get it. There's actually an even simpler way for people with very few transactions to actually generate e-Teams invoices through the eCitizen platform. Yeah. So the options are there. But then we also have to acknowledge that taxpayers need the resource. You need some form of a smart device to be able to do it. Sorry. You also need connectivity to be able to do that. And I think the biggest challenge, and especially to these hard-to-tax sectors and the informal economy, look at farmers, where you find you have these growers. You have to look at different farms for them to be able to consolidate the produce, for you to be able to actually sell and export to the market. The challenge of the farmer on the ground to be able to actually generate the e-Teams invoice sorry, is actually what seems to be a challenge.
Yeah.
But I think on the issue of the threshold, it clearly needs to be aligned.
Let me take a break there as we allow James to catch a breather there. We shall be right back with a lot more on this conversation, focusing on the proposed amendments to the Finance Bill of 2024. Stay tuned.
Nivea Pearl and Beauty Deodorant. The perfect balance of 48-hour protection and care for soft, smooth, and beautiful underarms. Try our new Pearl and Beauty Black Pearl for smooth and perfumed underarms.
The moment I feel my pain starting to fade, it's like I'm going back to myself on a really good day.
Panadol Extra releases you from strong pain. Panadol, release starts here.
The moment I feel my pain starting to fade, it's like I'm going back to myself on a really good day.
Panadol Extra releases you from strong pain. Panadol, release starts here.
Garissa University takes great pride in the excellence of its academic programs and graduates. The University Council, Board of Management, Senate, staff and students of Garissa University request the pleasure of your presence during the 5th graduation ceremony for the conferment of degrees and diplomas by the Chancellor on Thursday 20th June from 7 a.m. The chief guest will be His Excellency President William Samoei Ruto. Cabinet secretaries, principal secretaries, governors, members of parliament and other dignitaries will also grace the occasion. The theme for this graduation is Resilience in the Pursuit of Knowledge Through Adversity. We'll be live on NTV and streaming live on our social media platforms. Congratulations to the class of 2024. Garissa University, Oasis of Innovation.
Welcome back to the session on Business Defined, where we are looking at the proposed amendments to the Finance Bill of 2024 following the press that we had right today at State House in Nairobi, where the parliamentary group from the Kenya Kwanza faction has indicated a raft of changes when it comes to Finance Bill 2024, including motor vehicle tax being dropped. And one of them, which stood out, is that bread, which had been proposed to be removed from the second schedule of the VAT Act, which means currently zero rated, was to be standard rated. But the question is this, folks. On Thursday, June 13th, Treasury Cabinet Secretary, that is Professor Njuguna Ndung'u, indicated that he'll be introducing special amendments to the VAT Act, one, so that everything which is currently zero rated goes to exempt status. Whatever is exempt goes to standard rated. Standard rated means 16% of VAT. And only items which are export destined, products and services, will be zero rated. So the question following today is, will bread remain zero rated? Will it move to exempt status? What's your interpretation, Steve?
Thanks again, Julians. You know, for every action that we take as far as bringing these particular proposals is concerned, there is need to look back and check where are we coming from. If you remember, when we were having the VAT Act of 2013, which was an overhaul after the overhaul of the VAT Act, that is Cap 476.
Yeah.
The intention was to streamline the schedules, the two schedules. That is the first schedule and the second schedule, which generally talks about exemptions as far as VAT is concerned and the zero rating particular schedules. Now the question was, why were we moving and why have we been wanting to move that route? It's because you had in the budget speech, the CS saying that the VAT cost or the VAT expenditures as far as government is concerned is quite high, and especially from a VAT perspective. But then, in as much as we are looking at this and wanting to cut that particular cost or that particular expenditure, can we look back and check why in the first place do we have the two schedules in the VAT Act? You know, if you look at exemptions, generally exemptions are supposed to either spur a particular sector of the economy, encourage investments, and also cushion those members of the society in terms of citizens that are vulnerable, so that you are able to bring forth those particular supplies and ensure that they are affordable. Yeah. And that is the whole essence and the focus of the government. So with this now focus of wanting to overhaul the two schedules, I think we need to be systematic, right? We need to be systematic and check what can we start with. Because if we have not healed the reason behind, the fundamental reason behind exemptions, which is also in other tax laws, because the fundamental reason is as I have put it, for example. Now, I find a reconciliation challenge, especially, and this is my opinion, in terms of if you look at what was the theme of the CS, the budget speech by the CS, among other things, it was climate change mitigation and adaptation for improved livelihoods, right? Now, when you look at improved livelihoods, now, how do you ensure that your citizens have improved livelihoods? And I actually welcome this particular move to listen to the cry of Kenyans and have bread, of course, moved, retained at zero rating.
Zero rated, yes.
Now, I know there was a lot of discussion around, and we had a lot of things being thrown and saying that bread, if Kenyans cannot afford bread, there is nduma, there is ngwashe.
Yes.
But if you went to the supermarket today, Julians, and you looked at the cost of bread and the cost of that nduma,
they're quite pricey. The healthier alternative. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
So to your question on where does that leave, and it's still a proposal, where does that leave bread as far as it being moved? Now, the best place to leave it is at zero rating. And my suggestion would be that those items, those particular supplies that are touching on the vulnerable members of the society, I think we should hold on those first as we transition, because at the end of the day, if that is the overhaul that is required to be done, then we be systematic. But with this at the back of our minds, are we saying that we are operating in a vacuum as a country, that we want to overhaul the exemptions and the zero ratings?
Yeah. Let me hold you there, Steve, and come to Wangoi. He has tabled a very good historical reflection of where we're coming from. And that's precisely why we need this overhaul, Steve, right? Because we came from the VAT Act of 2013, which was meant to clean up the mess that had been created by 476 in terms of exemptions. Don't you think then Treasury has a solid basis from where it is coming with this overhaul?
Thank you for that question. Definitely they have a reason, because one of the reasons that Treasury put forward is that the tax expenditure, especially on VAT,
this
is tax
it's 248 billion,
yes,
actually.
It's 248 billion. These are revenue loss as a result of exemption and incentives. So, of course, the Treasury and the Revenue Authority are coming from that point, that we're actually losing a lot of tax revenue from tax exemptions. But then, if you look at it in terms of the bigger picture and the ripple effect, and that is what we are challenging the National Treasury and the members of Parliament to think about, is if you remove exemptions, say in the first schedule that outlines exemptions, looking at that schedule, most of those items are actually either healthcare, so most of them are medicaments, healthcare products, pharmaceutical products, and closely followed by agricultural inputs. Yeah. So if you clean up that and say you're going to remove all exempt and make them standard rated, of course the cost of producing these things are going to go high, and ultimately that cost is going to be pushed to the consumer. Yeah. So on an already struggling economy, and with the citizens being left with so little to take home, then the cost of everything is going to rise by just translating things from the exempt schedule to the VATable standards. Then it's going to be terrible. That is number one. Number two, if you look at it from a very critical perspective, some of these things, like say moving them from again zero rated to exempt, that change happens every year. It happens every year. We see items, fertilizer last year it was exempt, this year is zero rated. This year it's bread, next year it's something else. So we have seen that also happening every year for the last 3 to 4 years of every finance cycle. What that does is also hindering the certainty of investors and national tax policy. So we want to operate in a regime where you are sure if you're going to venture into this business, then you are certain this is what is going to apply for the next couple of years. But this issue of now changing it to another, from one VAT treatment to the other, is also brings a challenge when it comes to in that regard. Lastly, in the budget speech by the CS, he was very general. He did not specify what is going to change. Yeah. So as it is now, we are still in a very dicey position where we don't know whether come Thursday we are going to have a whole repeal of the first schedule and everything goes to zero rated, and the second schedule, except exports, all come to the first schedule. And from the statement today, issued by the statement that came out in the afternoon today, there was an issue of basic commodities being retained as zero rated. So again, there's also a conflict. To what extent is basic commodity? If my cost of production of agricultural inputs, healthcare might not be bread, but it's actually very important. It is access to healthcare. It is access to now the food that will put the bread on the table. So just limiting it to say only basic commodities are going to be zero rated, again, we are not sure what this entails.
Okay. James, where does bread fall now? I know we have not seen the report, but listening to the statements made, is it zero rated? Is it exempt? Is it standard rated?
I think it is zero rated based on the statements. And what I expect, I don't expect a radical change of the schedules. That one I don't expect. Maybe it is the long-term thinking of what we should see with regards to that. But just to echo what Wangoi has mentioned, if you actually look at the way the first schedule is structured, the way the items are listed, we have what we call the East African Community Common External Tariff. Yeah. The way the tariff codes are arranged, you'll actually notice it starts with live animals, raw agricultural produce in Chapter 1, as it moves down to finished and more processed items in that list. That is more or less the same format the first schedule is on exempt items. So you'll always notice animals are first in the list, then raw agricultural produce, then the medicaments. Actually, that's normally the general structure. And I think there's a particular reason for that sort of organization, because normally, there's a thin line between exemption and zero rating, and the argument that zero rating is better than exemption. But then remember, when we're also having the conversation on zero rating and exemption, it works in two fronts. It's actually at the point of importation. So if you're dealing with an item that is listed in the first schedule or second schedule, it is a zero rating status or an exemption at the point of importation, as well as the point of sale. And what you'll notice, even for items, most of the times that are moved to exemption, are normally items that have inputs, largely that are imported. So you find the effect of the exemption is only felt on sort of in-country services or value addition that happens. And a good example is you could actually be dealing with an item that is VAT exempt, but then you find you need raw materials to make this product. So at the point of importation, you're actually not paying any import VAT on the raw materials. But then remember, there is transportation, there is storage, there is packaging, there are those other value addition sort of services that come in between. And that's where the cost of exemption comes in, because then you have to absorb that 16% when it comes to the pricing. Zero rating on the same front works in the same way. It's only that with zero rating, you are basically allowed to claim any inputs that come with it.
Correct.
So in a nutshell, bread will be zero rated. In as much as in the budget statement, the CS alluded to that cleanup. Remember, the confines of what can change is in this in this document. So whatever we saw in terms of e-mobility that are currently zero rated moving to 16%, solar products that are currently VAT exempt moving to standard rate at 16%, that more or less will change. There could be changes here and there on specific items, as is always the norm every budget cycle with VAT changes where there is a movement from one category to another. So more or less that's what we should expect to see from a VAT categorization point of view.
I see. One of the key proposals which, in my view, is significant but seems overlooked when it comes to VAT is on Section 17, when it comes to the apportionment formula. Let me start from the very basics. Steve, just explain to us what the apportionment formula does and what is the proposal.
All right. So Section 17 talks about those taxpayers, and I mean VAT registered taxpayers, who deal in mixed supplies, right? Mixed supplies being that you are dealing with taxable supplies, say at 16%, and zero-rated supplies and exempt supplies. Remember, zero-rated supplies are taxable supplies.
Yes.
So when I talk of taxable supplies, I mean the taxable at 16%, 0%, which is zero-rated, and now exempt. That is why we are saying it's mixed. Currently, as that particular section is worded, and as it is, now if you incur inputs for furtherance of your exempt part of business, and by that I mean when you do your proportion of exempt supplies over all supplies, and that particular formula or apportionment gives you more than 90%.
Yes.
What that means is that your taxable supplies are more than 90% of your total supplies.
Correct.
All right? What that means is therefore that currently we will overlook the exempt bit and allow you to deduct all inputs that you have incurred. And the converse is true, that if your exempt supplies to your total supplies are less, or I would say they are more than 90%, it means that the biggest chunk of your business is exempt. And we will also overlook and say you do not qualify to deduct anything.
Yes.
Right? And so the change that we are having here, being proposed by the finance bill, is we are going to do away with that particular apportionment formula. And we will say that you will only be able to deduct. We make use of that particular formula. So if your exempt supplies are 90%, we apportion that. You apportion your input tax with that exact formula, and ensure that you get your fair share of the inputs that you're supposed to deduct. Yes.
Very good explaining that. So now, let me throw in part of my struggle with this proposal. How does that work? How does the switch in the apportionment formula work in an environment where ideally, keyword here is ideally, we should be on VAT auto-population courtesy of e-teams? Because I'm not very clear on how that will be baked into consideration, and I don't know who wants to go first, James or Wangoi.
Lady first.
I'm going to go for it.
Well, ideally, VAT auto-populated should be in place and working, but there are teething challenges to it. So when you file your VAT return and you're filing it on iTax, of course, the PAC allows you to declare various sections of the various cells.
Yes.
So you will have your taxable tab, you'll have your exempt tab, you'll have your zero rated tab. So with the removal of the apportionment formula, the expectation now is that it's going to be a direct attribution of the percentage. If your taxable, your exempt cells are 50% of taxable, you're only allowed to claim 50% because the other 50 is deemed taxable. So there is a direct allocation of the input VAT.
Which direct attribution comes from you or from the authority? Because they have visibility via eTIMS ideally.
Yes. So the challenge here is, so that's the ideal, and that's the understanding. So the challenge here is when you file it, or even certain input, it's very hard to apportion things like rent to say this went to exempt and this went to taxable.
Exactly.
And the issue that this section is seeking to address is tax planning around the months that I have a lot of input, I don't declare exempt. So I only declare my taxable sales and I automatically claim everything. Now with eTIMS, when you raise your ETR, it's automatically translated. So
ETR being electronic tax register.
Yes, ETR being when you do an eTIMS invoice, it's automatically translated, and so KRA can know this month these are your exempt sales and these are your vertable sales. The way it is currently on the returns, I'm confused. I call them manual because now there's VA, which is automatic. So the way it is now on the iTax returns, it was still able to apportion. It was still able to apportion your input to exempt and taxable sales. So with VAA, the expectation again is it will have a formula embedded where it is able to apportion. But then now the challenge is, for input, you have until 6 months to claim. You have until 6 months to claim input. But for sales, they are transmitted real time.
Yes.
So I could easily be punished even by that VAA for having the sales transmitted real time and my purchases are disallowed, yet when the month that I have to bring them in, the same also happens. Mm-hmm. So also that timing difference of for input you have 6 months, and for sales you're supposed to declare them by the 20th of the following month. We are seeing some challenges on how that will work on VAA.
James, don't you see a challenge here?
Yeah, there is a real challenge. Actually, the proposal to do away with the 90-10 fraction formula.
You have a problem with that to begin with.
Is simple. Everything, any input VAT that is claimed should be directly attributed. That's actually, because actually if you look at the law and the way it is structured, it starts by talking of any input that is directly attributable to a taxable supply, you can actually claim in full. Any input directly attributable to an exempt supply, you are not supposed to claim.
Yeah.
Then you come to this category of inputs that Wangoi alluded to, that are common expenses, that you cannot say rent, electricity, this one is directly attributable. That's why we apply the 90-10 formula. Now, even with the auto-population and eTIMS, there is need for some human intervention, and you asked a good question. Whose prerogative is it to know the input is directly attributable? It cannot be the revenue authority. It cannot be that auto-populated return. It does not know the nature of input that you've incurred as a business person. And I can give you an example. I might be having mixed supplies. I have a category of taxable supplies or taxable sales, and I also have VAT exempt sales. But in this particular month, I only incurred transport that relates to taxable supplies.
Yes.
Now, who knows that apart from myself?
Exactly.
I'm the one who knows. So, and what I'm basically saying, in as much as the auto-population has actually made filing easy, because then the system is able...
James?
No, it has. In the sense that, number one, there are a lot of people who used to miss on a lot of input claims.
Yeah.
Now, and remember, the way the law is currently, there are two conditions that you must meet to be able to claim input. In as much as you have 6 months to do it, the very first condition, you must have the necessary documentation to be able to claim input. eTIMS is streamlining that, because the moment you have an eTIMS invoice, remember, at the point of supply, it was transmitted to KRA in real time.
Yeah.
It is actually sitting as an input. If you download your auto-populated return, it is actually there. It's already captured. So at least it saves you the headache of missing out on any input. But then the other condition for you to be able to claim input, in as much as you have the 6 months, that sale must be declared by the supplier. It is there in law. And you see, I think that had a lot of challenges because before the Finance Act 2023, the wording that was between the two conditions was or.
Yeah.
So people used to argue, even if the supplier has not declared, that's not my problem.
Yeah.
It is actually his work to do to declare the output. And my work is, I have the necessary documentation, I'll claim the input. So in a nutshell, Julians, what still needs to happen, even with the auto-populated returns, I am the person who has incurred the input. If I'm following the law and I can directly attribute it to taxable, I have to claim it.
The burden is on me.
Now the burden of proof will come at the point of audit, where KRA comes and says, hang on, you have mixed supplies, but we're not seeing you apportioning the input.
Yeah.
Can you explain why?
I see.
Yeah.
Still on indirect taxes. So the chairperson of the Finance and Planning Committee told us explicitly we are dropping motor vehicle tax. That issue of standard rating bread is no longer there. But on edible oil, he said, we are doing something about edible oil. Steve, what are your thoughts about what doing something could be?
A pronouncement by government where doing something is concerned. We don't know whether doing something is to increase it. We don't know.
Surely it cannot be.
We are not sure,
yes.
right? So the doing something can be either way. But of course, based upon after a lot of citizens and hue and cry, we expect that something is going to be done, which is in my estimation, to at least reduce it, if not to scrap it off that particular addition of that particular tax in its entirety. Now, with that in mind, and still goes back to my initial question, when we say that the theme that we had, or the theme that the government had, at least for this particular budget, is to improve livelihoods.
Yes.
It goes back to the fundamental question that everyone should be asking. By the time we were coming up with this particular bill, were these two aligned? All right? Now, how would increasing the cost of a basic commodity like that be aligned to improving livelihoods? And goes back to the same question that we had earlier. What is the law-making process? What goes behind the scenes before we can see what we see, before we can see this particular document and the kind of presumptions that are put there? I think you know that even before the bill goes in, we usually have submissions that are usually given by stakeholders. Those submissions are given to Treasury in the hope that they are going to be considered before the bill and these particular proposals can come through, And no one thinks that such kind of things would make see the light of day. So in terms of knowing what doing something is concerned, directly to your question, I wouldn't peg or bag my hopes there, really. Not yet.
Yeah.
I would want to see what is this doing something. We need to see it as he is saying, my brother is saying that let's wait for that particular document and we see how is that doing something implemented in that particular document.
Wango, I was really surprised that in their remarks there was no mention, absolutely none, of the proposal in the finance bill to repeal Section 14 of the Excise Duty Act around the excise duty input-output, which is a big deal, because I thought today they were dealing with big deals. What do you make of that?
Very interesting, yeah, and I totally agree with you. That particular section has a history. So if you read the national tax policy, part of the proposals that had been suggested under the excise duty is to actually have Section 14 in place, that we are going to allow you to deduct the input incurred in manufacturing against the excise duty that you're going to charge. So and this is after the national tax policy has just been signed and it's in place, and shortly after the finance bill comes in and we see that proposal. So it all took us by surprise, and of course if if it's not removed, then we definitely are aware of the financial consequences and the economic consequences that section is going to have. So in terms of removing big ticket issues, it is actually a shock that it was not there in the statement today. So we wait to see whether come the Finance Act in a few days' time, it will be there.
James.
I think that proposal to do away with the excise input is very retrogressive. And maybe just to put it into perspective, remember the input excise is the one that is applicable to manufacturers who have incurred any input on any raw materials to claim against the output excise. That you can automatically see the impact it will have in terms of the price of the products that are actually manufactured by the manufacturers. The other thing is internet data services.
Yes.
Because I think a majority of internet service providers nowadays will normally buy the bandwidth in bulk. They are charged excise, then they will charge excise to the end customer. So I think to me that is retrogressive, especially in an era where there is digital transformation. We obviously expect our internet bills to go up as a result. But maybe just to add on to that, this finance bill, if there is a sector that has been hit by this thing, is the manufacturing sector. I will not lie. Because there is actually nothing good to talk about this bill when it comes to the manufacturing sector.
Yeah.
We have the eco-levy. This is year 2 of the current administration. Last year we were contending with the export promotion and investment levy.
Yes.
Eco-levy has come in. Just to compound the effect of the vegetable oils. Remember, this is a 25% excise duty that is proposed. At the same time, there is a proposal when it comes to plastics, and which I think now is becoming a bore every budget cycle on locally manufactured articles of plastic. So there's a proposal as well to introduce excise duty at the rate of 10% on locally manufactured plastic articles. You can actually see the ripple effect that it will have ultimately to the price of vegetable oils. So just to echo what Stephen has mentioned, whatever they are doing, we never know where it will actually land us.
But when you say that there is nothing good, and I'm saying this comment tongue-in-cheek, is look, there was the requirement that alcoholic beverage manufacturers will remit their excise collections every 24 hours. They've now been given 5 working days.
But that is only alcoholic manufacturers. I think.
But they're manufacturers.
They're manufacturers, yes. But you see, I'm actually worried because when I joined the practice, Thika Town was a typical example of an industrial town. And if you might recall, we used to have the accelerated investment deductions of 150%.
Yeah.
Yes, I know there is that rationalization on the government and the losses in taxes with the many exemptions and the incentives. But don't you think it is a good thing to incentivize the sector? Look, it is very unfortunate that we have to talk about big multinationals who are manufacturers having to leave the Kenyan market to go to other jurisdictions because the cost of doing business, primarily the cost of electricity, is unbearable.
Yeah.
And if you look at even the trend with the manufacturing sector, its contribution to GDP has been decreasing. It's now merely at 8%.
Yeah.
The government keeps talking about creation of employment. If there is actually a sector that can sort that problem within a year, is the manufacturing sector, as well as the agriculture sector. So I think in terms of emphasis and focus, the government has actually missed the point when it comes to manufacturing.
I see. Before we take a break, let me come to you, Steve. One thing I really struggle with, how will VAT on foreign exchange transactions work? Is it VAT on the spreads or what exactly?
A good question, Julians. And it has been the question that everyone is asking, especially within the financial sector and the banking sector.
Even the proposers of this bill themselves were asking during the submissions, please, can you suggest to us how we'll enforce this thing?
Indeed, and that is where I was going with this particular, as I try to answer you, and I'm not sure I'm going to, but allow me to proceed. You see, when the submissions are being done, why do you make a submission? What is the intention of public participation? If you are the drafter of the law, then you invite the stakeholders to come so that they can tell you, in terms of this particular proposal that I have given, what do you think about it? It is expected that you are the drafter of the law, and for that reason, you should first of all tell me what is the rationale behind it. To shift the ball again to me, to explain what you intended is just, I mean, I don't know how to call it, but...
It's a very funny comment.
You know, but now, at the end of the day, and to answer you, even if it were to go to the spreads, you saw some pronouncements from the banking industry where they posed that particular question. And of course, they gave their submissions in terms of what will be the effect of this. Let us even first of all park how it would be done, right? Because we don't know, right? Now, what would have been the effect of having that introduced? Of course, the Revenue Authority and the drafters, they would have gotten away of how that would be levied, right? But then the bigger question is, what would be the impact? Because when we answer that question, what the impact is, and I'm afraid that that question is never answered, and if it is, just sparingly, you know. If we get it right in terms of what the effect is, and I want to echo what my brother is saying, look at the manufacturing sector, for example. You know, that is what would spur the economy. That is what would build this kick that the government is looking for, because we all want the government to proceed, to succeed.
Allow me to hold you there. We need to take a break, so we come back for the last leg of this conversation. We have been touching on a raft of issues following the pronouncements today. When we come back, we want to talk about one thing: the tax amnesty program, which draws to an end on the 30th of June this year. So stay tuned.
Tonight, the unconventional protests against the finance bill.
Whatever we're doing here in terms of exercising our civic rights. Na walete hiyo tiaga saina marashi. Walete tiaga. Ndio inakam. Haya, naenda hivi nakam.
Tunaibiwa na documents hivi na signature. Afu siku moja tutakuja tupate Kenya hata si yetu. Reject your finance.
Police came guns blazing against protesters who were armed with their voices, phones, and firm resolve. Plus, the announcement that was meant to calm tensions.
And therefore, the proposed 16% VAT on bread has been dropped.
But
of Garissa University request the pleasure of your presence during the 5th graduation ceremony for the conferment of degrees and diplomas by the Chancellor on Thursday 20th June from 7 a.m. The chief guest will be His Excellency President William Samoei Ruto. Cabinet secretaries, principal secretaries, governors, members of parliament and other dignitaries will also grace the occasion. The theme for this graduation is Resilience in the Pursuit of Knowledge Through Adversity. We'll be live on NTV and streaming live on our social media platforms. Congratulations to the class of 2024, Garissa University, Oasis of Innovation.
Mortein Doom, with its trusted formulation, it provides protection in seconds. So spread the Mortein Doom message of how we, you and I, can fight to end malaria. Mortein Doom, Kenya's #1 choice.
Imperfections, blackheads. Try Garnier's Pure Active 3-in-1 Charcoal, powered by salicylic acid and purified charcoal to reduce pimple-causing germs by 99.5%. One product, 3 uses for a pure skin. Garnier Pure Active 3-in-1 Charcoal, #1 in South Africa, by Garnier Naturally.
This is NTV.
Tonight. The unconventional protests against the finance bill.
Whatever we're doing here, now I let you sign
tunaibiwa na madama TV na masignature afu siku moja tapate Kenya yetu reject your finance.
Police came guns blazing against protesters who were armed with their voices, phones and firm resolve. Plus, the announcement that was meant to calm tensions.
And therefore, the proposed 16% VAT on bread has been dropped.
But what was not said? Where will the revenue come from? We tell you what is set to cost you more. Also tonight,
the judiciary will work on boosting security across all court stations.
Judges and magistrates agree to return to work tomorrow on Chief Justice Kome's word as the judiciary fraternity remembers and celebrates Principal Magistrate Monica Kivuti.
The moment is yours. Seize the day. Changamkia your potential with new Nescafe 3-in-1 Creamy White.
You stay soft, Adric concentrate. 1. It is 4 times more concentrated. 2. It is packed with 4 times more fragrance. 3. 1 bottle gives you 40 washes. You stay soft, Adric concentrate.
Also available in convenient sachets.
Garissa University takes great pride in the excellence of its academic programs and graduates. The University Council, Board of Management, Senate, staff and students of Garissa University request the pleasure of your presence during the 5th graduation ceremony for the conferment of degrees and diplomas by the Chancellor on Thursday 20th June from 7 a.m. The chief guest will be His Excellency President William Samoei Ruto. Cabinet secretaries, principal secretaries, governors, members of parliament and other dignitaries will also grace the occasion. The theme for this graduation is Resilience in the Pursuit of Knowledge Through Adversity. We'll be live on NTV and streaming live on our social media platforms. Congratulations to the class of 2024, Garissa University, Oasis of Innovation.
Folks, welcome to the tail end of our conversation focusing on the Finance Bill report coming from the Finance and Planning Committee of the National Assembly. We want to wrap up this conversation. For that, something is drawing to a close. Actually, 2 very critical things are drawing to a close on the 30th of June 2024. Let me start with Wangoi here. The tax amnesty program coming to a close. I'm really surprised at how much it is underperforming. The latest numbers we got from KRA as of May was about 45% performance rate, raising about 22 billion against the targeted 51 billion. In your assessment, why would this be the case?
Thanks for that question. So maybe to put into context, the tax amnesty is a program inviting taxpayers to come in, voluntarily declare their tax liabilities and be forgiven and get a waiver of penalties and interests. So it comes in just after the lapse of what we previously had as a voluntary tax disclosure program that ran from 2020 to 2023. And then parallel to the voluntary tax disclosure program, in the law we also had provisions for waiver of penalties and interests. So we had that up until the Finance Act of 2023 repealed that. So historically, how waivers would work is where you have tax arrears, you apply for a waiver, but when you apply, it is the discretion, the KRA will recommend, and the KRA was only allowed to grant waivers up to 1 million Kenya shillings, but then they would recommend the CS for the National Treasury and Planning to approve the waiver. So we had a lot of backlog of funds sitting in waiver of penalties that have not been processed, and taxpayers always had this liability over their head, not sure when the waivers will ever be approved. So shortly after that, we had the VTDP, and it performed relatively well because it was staggered over 3 years.
Isn't it still underway?
No, VTDP ended.
Okay.
It ended. Yeah. It ended last year in June.
Yes.
And then now September we had amnesty.
The amnesty.
Yes. So September we had the amnesty. So the amnesty has been running from last year September, and it lapses 30th of June.
Correct.
So generally, again, the basis of this amnesty, number one, is usually to mop up revenue. So as the taxpayers would benefit with having waivers of penalties and interest and clean ledgers and removing the contingent liabilities of penalties and interest from their books, the government would mop up revenue in that regard. So what we've seen with this particular amnesty program is that it applied to tax liabilities up to December of 2022, and it was a 100% waiver. So there are certain issues to consider around why it has not performed as we expected. So number one is last year around June, just towards at a point similar like now, when we are closing the financial year, KRA introduced a 40-60 waiver. And they were telling people, come, we shall waive 60, you just pay 40. And that saw a very high increase in collection. Actually, remember, it was around 220 billion in the month of June.
Correct.
Which was the
record
highest
collection.
Ever recorded.
Record collection.
Yes. So now looking ahead, June of 2024, where as it is now, the financial year 2023-2024 is coming to an end, and there is a revenue deficit of 576 billion that has not been collected.
Yeah.
And if we realistically look at it, for the last 8 months, KRA has been doing an average of around 171 billion every month. So it is still a very ambitious figure to collect. So that is number one. That is currently on the taxes that KRA is expecting to collect in June. Now back to the amnesty. One of the reasons why it hasn't performed well is, number one, most people took advantage of VTDP that ran for 3 years, and it was 100% in year 1, 50, then 25, and most people in year 1 sort of took advantage. Yeah. And then the 40-60, another big lot took advantage, and then now we have the ones remaining for amnesty. The danger we have seen with it is, even when the amnesty does not commit on the taxpayer being open up to an audit, many a times you've seen when a taxpayer comes and voluntarily declares, then an audit follows. So the conservative thing to do is I keep quiet with my liabilities, in full knowledge that for every year that I'm not audited and it's not found, it sort of lapses, because our law allows you to be audited up to 5 years back. So it sort of lapses for every year that have not audited. So that could be one of the issues that people have not taken up the amnesty program. And another, what you can actually say, obvious reason is cash flow constraints. So businesses are struggling, businesses are actually laying off, businesses are in negotiation with the Revenue Authority on payment plan, even for your current ordinary revenue. So you are like, sorry, I've delayed paying PAYE, but I'll pay next month, as you bear the penalties and interest. So there's the issue of, I still have my recurrent liabilities to pay, but I'm holding back taxes that I have not paid. So what do I prioritize? Do I prioritize my salary or my current or the back ones? With regards to the back ones, I know in a few years, probably like come June this year, 2018 CIT is going to fall because it's already 5 years past. So people sort of just prioritize and pay their current taxes and sort of defer amnesty.
Okay. James.
Yes, so thank you, Julians. I think the challenge with the amnesty has been, I won't repeat what Wangoi has mentioned, and I think those are the real challenges. The overlap between VTDP
and the amnesty.
Remember, for you to take advantage of the amnesty, we are talking about unpaid principal taxes for the period up to 31st December 2022. And what we've seen in terms of a challenge, the first issue is the lack of migration of legacy related issues to iTax. We have a lot of taxpayers who have these instances of periods before 2015, largely before iTax came in. And for you to actually lodge the amnesty application, that liability must be sitting on iTax, because when you log in, you have to select the tax obligation. If that liability is not on iTax, then the challenge of how do I bring it up and take advantage of the amnesty comes in. I think the other instance is a lot of assessments that are being done by KRA after audits. Some of them are still ongoing for periods up to December 2022. It is barely a week and a half. Thereabouts maybe 2 weeks to the end of the month. Some of the audits are still going on. So is there really enough time for taxpayers to take advantage of the amnesty? So that appears to be the biggest challenge. And my recommendation would be if there could be consideration, in as much as that was not a particular issue addressed in the bill, for an extension of this amnesty. I think it's a good thing for the government. There are many taxpayers who are actually willing to take this up. But I think at least some assurance that you'll not be hounded down when you come down and do the declaration. And also to give, businesses are really struggling cash flow-wise, and I think Wamboi has really articulated that point. Maybe a consideration to extend the amnesty by a year, so that taxpayers can take advantage of it.
My director tells me we have 4 minutes to go, so let me give each of you a minute to give your closing remarks. And since we haven't heard from you on the amnesty, I'll give you 1.5 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Julians. Without belaboring that point on tax amnesty, mine would be specifically on that consideration for that to be extended, the timeline to be extended, because it's a plus for the KRA and for the government if we are going to roll back and see what happened last year, right? Now, in terms of my closing remarks and with regard to what we have seen as far as the budget speech and the revenue raising measures are concerned, I think mine would be twofold. You know, year in, year out, we have been running a deficit, always looking to fill that particular gap, you know. And the question that we need to ask ourselves is, why the gap? If you look at the two sides of a typical business, you have the expense side, the expenditure side, and you also do have the revenue side. We always start with the expenditure side, then we start thinking, where do we get the money to fill that, right? Now, and I think the biggest challenge that we are facing is the how we use this particular money, right? So is the expenditure really what it ought to be? You and I know there's a lot of wastage in government. And it appears that no one, at least for now, we have not seen any pronouncements, you know? And that is where the leakage is coming. That is where the hemorrhaging is coming from. If we can secure, because some time back I had someone say that we do not have a revenue problem.
We have an expenditure problem.
We have an expenditure problem. If we can fix that, but the question is, Julians, who is ready to bear that cut?
Let me hold you there. I'll go your closing thoughts. A minute.
Okay. I guess for me, it's with all these proposals that are coming in, we are already in a very deep hole as a country. And we don't know how deep that hole is going to go with the Finance Act coming into force. In fact, I've seen that one of the proposals from today's speech is that some commencement dates with regards to excess duty, which was proposed to 1st September, is brought earlier to 1st August. So we'll have some of these provisions coming into force 1st of July and others 1st August, and then the ones that come into effect 1st January, mostly COP tax proposals. So as we have all seen, with this deficit that keeps increasing every year, and there's the issue of how far can you go? Yeah. You cannot tax me to prosperity. You cannot tax me to my death. So we are already in a hole, and as it said, if you're in a hole, stop digging.
Okay. James, 30 seconds.
Yeah, so thank you, Julian. I guess we have speculated a lot. We just have to wait. I believe you mentioned the report is out. Yes. We'd obviously be very interested to see what is in the report. Majority of the things are some of the things that were highlighted today. But I guess we'll have to wait until at the end of the month when we get the Finance Act, so that we know what to expect. I think today was an attempt to manage Kenyans. I think I have to give it to Kenyans for voicing the concerns. These are real concerns, and I think the government should actually take them positively. And this should also inform future budget processes. Okay. It's an unlikely event that people have to go and protest for them to be heard.
Yes.
But then let's wait for 30th of June.
Thank you. We have to leave it at that point. Unfortunately, we can unpack this conversation going into hours, but thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. Remember, we now have the Finance Bill report from the Finance and Planning Committee. Stay tuned. That's where it is coming up on Twitter.
Garissa University takes great pride in the excellence of its academic programs and graduates. The University Council, Board of Management, Senate, staff and students of Garissa University request the pleasure of your presence during the 5th graduation ceremony for the conferment of degrees and diplomas by the Chancellor on Thursday 20th June from 7 a.m. The chief guest will be His Excellency President William Samoei Ruto. Cabinet secretaries, principal secretaries, governors, members of parliament and other dignitaries will also grace the occasion. The theme for this graduation is Resilience in the Pursuit of Knowledge Through Adversity. We'll be live on NTV and streaming live on our social media platforms. Congratulations to the class of 2024. Garissa University, Oasis of Innovation.
Ili uweze kupata Mungu yu mwema, kama sikiza tuni yako, bonyeza *812*806#.
Skiza Non-Nation.
Kote nchini mbele tuendelee, mbele Kenya twende mbele,
Kenya twende mbele. NCBA. Go for it.
Kikohozi cha muda wowote, kutokwa na jasho kwa wingi usiku, uchungu kwenye kifua, afya kudhoofika, tafuta matibabu. Labda ni TB ni ugonjwa wa kweli, ukipimwa matibabu yapo utapona. Daktari kwa ushauri, tumia dawa kwa nidhamu. Elimu tupashane, tupige vita TB. Pimwa TB, tibiwa ishi poa.
Pimwa TB, tibiwa ishi poa.
This is NTV.
Well, the streets of Nairobi were for the better police officers against protesters. But that's just part of the story. The other part of it is that the streets of Nairobi experienced something new. A new generation of young people who came out in large numbers, organized what appears to be an organic protest against the finance bill of 2024. The protests today were consequential, intentional, calculated by the young people to achieve maximum exposure of their message, massive displeasure of how the government of the day had proposed new tax measures that, in their view of the young Kenyans, are punitive. The #Occupy Parliament protest was also a departure from previous protests that have ended up violently with destruction of property and loss of life. Still, it must be said, the protesters conducted themselves peacefully, and we must interrogate, as a country, the police services' use of tear gas and other violent means to break what are peaceful proceedings. There is a dangerous culture developing in the country where the police treat practically every protest as an illegal activity. Today, we have seen police dispersing very peaceful protesters with tear gas and water cannons. The police must respect the citizens' constitutional right to protest and instead provide security. Of course, it is important for those protests to remain peaceful, but the police cannot arrogate themselves the power to arbitrarily take away a constitutionally guaranteed right. Further, the police officers rounded up and even injured journalists who were simply documenting the protests. This is unacceptable. Good evening. Top stories making headlines tonight. The unconventional protests against the finance bill.
Whatever we're doing here in terms of exercising our civic rights. Na walete hiyo tear gas, haina marashi.
Walete tear gas.
Ndio inakam. Haya, naenda hivi nakam.
Tunaibiwa na documents hivi na signature. Afu siku moja tutakuja tupate Kenya hata si yetu. Reject your finance.
Police came guns blazing against protesters who were armed with their voices, phones, and firm resolve. Plus, the announcement that was meant to calm tensions.
And therefore, the proposed 16% VAT on bread has been dropped.
But what was not said? Where will the revenue come from? We tell you what is set to cost you more. Also tonight,
The judiciary will work on boosting security across all court stations.
judges and magistrates agree to return to work tomorrow on Chief Justice Kome's word as the judiciary fraternity remembers and celebrates Principal Magistrate Monica Kivuti. And
it does not make business sense to screen a 20-year-old or a 25-year-old. And even if they to develop the cancer, it will come 10, 12, 15 years later.
understanding the Social Health Insurance Fund. On The Heartbeat, we delve into the shift to shift.
Live from Nation Centre, this is NTV Tonight with James Smart.
Well, good evening everyone and welcome to the program. Our silent interpreter is Flora Atieno. Let's start where we should. And the Finance and National Planning Committee's report on the Finance Bill 2024 was tabled in Parliament this afternoon. The National Assembly Speaker, Moses Wetangula, has issued the following directions with regards to its way forward. First, on Wednesday morning, the committee chair, Kimani Kuria, will move the motion on report of the bill for debate. Then the debate will go on through the afternoon session until 9:30 p.m. The debate on the bill will again resume on Thursday morning session. The Speaker has directed any member of Parliament who would want to propose an amendment to the bill to do so by 1 p.m. that Thursday. Thereafter, Thursday afternoon, members will vote to make a decision on the report of the committee on the bill during its second reading. On Tuesday next week, in the afternoon, members will move amendments approved by the Speaker at the Committee of the Whole, otherwise known as the third reading of the bill. Members will be then taking a final vote on the bill. Also, members will be considering the Appropriations Bill 2024 on government expenditure introduced in the House this afternoon. Well, now today's anti-finance bill 2024 protest were not your everyday demos. They were a statement of sorts from young people who came out to oppose what they termed as oppression by the Kenya Kwanza regime. Peaceful protest turned chaotic, with police seen to disperse the protest fearlessly. Journalists who were not spared on the melee, and some activists and protesters alike arrested. This went on despite the Kenya Kwanza administration seeking to cool temperatures by announcing changes to the proposals in the finance bill. The morning efforts announced from State House did not dampen the drive to protest the proposed law. Our senior reporter, NTV Milton Otenges, will be bringing you that story and more on our collection of all the stories that have happened today on the protests and the questions that are being asked about the finance bill. Now, let's shift focus a bit before we come back to those stories. Starting July 1st, 2024, access to healthcare will transition to the new Social Health Authority, otherwise known as SHA. Under this system, each household will need to contribute 2.75% of their income as a statutory deduction, with a reduced minimum monthly contribution of 300 shillings, down from the previous 500 shillings required by the National Health Insurance Fund. So, what does this mean for you? Helen Naura breaks it down on The Heartbeat tonight.
The Kenya Kwanza government has recently shifted its focus from curative to preventive health services as part of its strategy to achieve universal health coverage. This new approach emphasizes primary health care and aims to address health issues before they require more extensive medical treatment. This new healthcare model in Kenya mandates that every citizen contribute a monthly statutory deduction of 2.75% of their household income to the primary healthcare fund. This initiative aims to enhance overall health outcomes by focusing on disease prevention and promoting healthier lifestyles.
If I am earning 100 and my wife is earning 100, the household income is 200. I apply 2.75. Okay? The reality is that mathematically, it is the same as charging each member 2.75. All right? But if you want us to combine, we can still combine and charge. It's the same.
Under the transition to the Social Health Insurance Fund, the minimum monthly contribution for Kenyans has been reduced from 500 Kenya shillings under the National Hospital Insurance Fund to 300 shillings under the Social Health Insurance Fund. This still raises concerns for those who are not employed and may struggle to afford even the reduced contribution.
2.75% of household income, regardless of whether it is in the formal sector or in the informal sector. The only difference is that in the formal sector, it is paid monthly via check-off in the usual manner from the employer, and for those in the informal sector, it is going to be paid as an annual premium payable in advance. Once that amount has been determined, and this is where the issue of the means testing instrument comes in, once that amount has been determined based on your income, then for those who are not able to come up with a lump sum payment as required, that's why the insurance premium financing options are going to be given, where you can have the financier paying the amount at once to the Social Health Authority so that you're covered for the whole year, and subsequently you make the payment in installments to the provider.
So what we want to do with SHA is to move towards highest standard. Because as it is now, we are providing healthcare services, but we want to ensure that at least it's of the highest standard. The other thing with the Constitution is that it gives right to emergency services. Previously, as a country, we did not have a route to execute the emergency services.
The fund is broken down into 4 cost segments, which the government says will be both individually and publicly financed.
8 billion is the stipend that we are paying to the CHP. 8 billion is the kit that we have given the CHP. Remember, this kit has some equipment for testing. The 53 billion, when a Kenyan visits a dispensary, that is level 2, or a health center, level 3, then equally, they are not expected to make a payment for the services at that level. And there you will get the basic services. You'll get testing for malaria and treatment for that malaria. And the 20 billion, let me also emphasize, the money we are talking about emergency. Ambulance services, if you get involved in an accident, that is where the money is going to come from.
The benefits package components in the new Social Health Insurance Fund include medical outpatient services, end-of-life, surgical, specialized pharmacy benefits, medical inpatient and critical care, accident and emergency, optical services, mental wellness, specialized essential diagnostic services, renal care, overseas treatment, dental health care, rehabilitative services, screening for common diseases, assistive devices, maternity and child health, oncology, and medical imaging services. The benefits package includes health education, wellness, counseling, and ongoing support, which require a payment of 900 shillings per person per annum at level 2, 3, and 4. The cost of maternity, newborn and child health services at level 2 and 3 hospitals is 11,200 Kenya shillings for a normal delivery and 32,600 Kenya shillings for a cesarean section. screening and management for precancerous lesions, as well as screening for common cancers such as breast, prostate, cervix and colon will be available from Level 2 to Level 6 health facilities. The fee for HPV screening will be 3,600 Kenya shillings. Prostate cancer screening is covered for males over 55 years, while colon cancer screening is covered for males over 40 years, and cervical cancer screening is only covered for women between the age of 30 to 50 years.
Cancer of the cervix tends to affect women 45 years and above. The average age of sexual debut in Kenya is 17 years. Ordinarily, it takes you 10 years for the abnormal changes caused by the human papillomavirus that causes cervical cancer for it to manifest. And from that manifestation again to overt cancer takes some time. So it means it does not make business sense to screen a 20-year-old or a 25-year-old every year for cervical cancer. One is that they could be able to get the HPV infection. Because of their high immunity, they are likely to clear it. And even if they to develop the cancer, it will come 10, 12, 15 years later. So that is the reason for age capping. Same for prostate cancer.
For renal care, the access point will be from Level 3 to Level 6 health facilities, and the cost of hemodialysis and hemodifiltration will be 10,650 Kenya shillings, an increase from the current 9,500 shillings. The shift from NHIF to SHIF involves transferring funds for a seamless transition, aimed at maintaining financial stability and uninterrupted health coverage. Community health promoters will assist elderly individuals with the registration to simplify the process. Instead of physical health insurance cards, individuals will receive a social insurance fund number for easier access to health services and reduced administrative burdens. Helen Aura, NTV.
And let's revisit our top story today. And actually the only running story is that one thing that stood out in today's protests is that there was no violence and no stone throwing. But despite the peace, the police met the protesters with excessive force, injuring several, including journalists and many others arrested. NTV's Ben Mushiri now reports that the conduct of the police has received condemnation. All right, we do apologize for that technical hitch. We'll be right back and we'll be able to replay that story. Taking a short break for now. Don't go too far.
Everyone can be an expert in his or her field. You can be an expert in all analytics. You know who will be the next star of the season. You can be an expert in all matches. You're an expert in statistics or people's opinions. 1xBet will help you show your expertise. Express yourself. You're the expert.
Countries across the world are currently grappling with climate change, a situation that has greatly contributed to frequent and severe droughts in Kenya, negatively affecting livelihoods, ecosystems, and the economy. As a way of mitigating this challenge, the government of Kenya has continued to implement drought resilience and climate adaptation measures to reduce vulnerability and exposure. The National Drought Management Authority, NDMA, is mandated to coordinate the management of drought risk in the country with the view to preventing their slide into emergencies.
nothing should come in the way of how you enjoy the game. So ukibet, bet responsibly. Bet na amount unaweza afford. If you need help, speak to a counselor today. Call 0800 724 835.
Kote nchini mbele tuendelee, mbele Kenya twende mbele,
Kenya
tuendelee,
twende mbele. NCBA, go for it.
Nivea Pearl and Beauty Deodorant. The perfect balance of 48-hour protection and care for soft, smooth, and beautiful underarms. Try our new Pearl and Beauty Black Pearl for smooth and perfumed underarms.
Umecheza loto moto na umewasaidia wengi. Unachangia pakubwa na zawadi kibao zinakungoja. Na kukupa ushindi wako ndio raha yetu.
Hawatende mema.
It's God sent.
Thank you so much.
Na sasa kwenye star 570 hash cheza lucky game ujipatie entry ticket ya kuingia kwenye draw ya kujishindia moja kati ya magari haya mawili, ikiwa ni Probox nayo na Demio nayo tushinde.
Azidi tu kuendelea kumbariki.
Kwenye star 570 hash wewe si mshindi tu, wewe ni tegemeo kubwa.
All right, welcome back. Now we visited our earlier stories that one thing that stood out in today's protest is that there was no violence and no stone throwing, but despite the peace, the police met the protesters with excessive force, injuring several, including journalists and many others arrested. NTV's Brian Mushiri now reports that the conduct of the police has received condemnation.
The Occupy Parliament protest, which saw youthful protesters engage in running battles with the police for the better part of the day in Nairobi's central business district, also saw hundreds of protesters arrested. In the course of the protests, plainclothes police officers as well as those uniformed were caught on camera arresting protesters, some in rather unconventional ways. Further, police were caught on camera in some instances meting violence on the protesters, who insist that it was the police who brought violence.
We had members of parliament who were abstaining from it. If they really wanted to advocate for our rights, they would have been there on that day. I believe this is a second chance for them to give themselves an opportunity to show us that they are there to work for us.
Kenya National Commission on Human Rights says by 5 p.m. it had received reports of arrests of 335 people who were being detained in various police stations across Nairobi.
As LSK will be seeking to intervene in terms of the kind of bail terms that they are given, we hope most of them can be released on free bond. I issued a statement in the morning that they ought to be released. We know today is a day of mourning, and it's quite unfortunate that we are looking at a scenario where one magistrate was killed by a police officer.
Most of those arrested were taken to Central Police Station, where again lawyers and advocates were tear-gassed inside the police station in their attempt to get those arrested out. Other protesters were detained at Kamukunji and Kilimani police stations. Inside police cells, some of the protesters could be heard singing anti-government songs. Brian Mushiri, NTV, Nairobi.
Now, today's Anti-Finance Bill 2024 protests were not your everyday demos. They were a statement of sorts from young people who came out to oppose what they termed as oppression by the Kenya Kwanza regime. Peaceful protest turned chaotic, with the police seen to disperse the protesters fiercely. Journalists were not spared in the melee, and some activists and protests alike arrested. This went on despite the Kenya Kwanza administration seeking to cool temperatures by announcing changes to the proposals in the finance bill. The morning efforts announced from State House did not dampen the drive to protest the proposed law. NTV's senior reporter Melita Oletenges has more on that protest that painted a picture of a changing tide in the country's democracy.
Chants that speak of disgruntlement and frustration. Youth who turned up for the anti-finance bill protests in Nairobi's central business district. Their resolve seemed clear: to have their voices heard. The picture of the protests was different from previous engagements. Their mission to walk down Parliament Road and make their point known that they are rejecting the Finance Bill 2024. They called it Occupy Parliament, but their efforts to get to their destination were thwarted. The will, boldness and persistence of the young people, many appearing to be in the Gen Z age group, stood out. Their courage was not hidden, and it was not expressed by way of violent engagements on their end, and neither did it have a political figure at the center of the demonstrations.
You've seen what the state puppets have been like, saying that even if we increase the taxes for the people who own cars, about 90% of Kenyans don't own cars. You cannot reason like that, because we are not doing this because it is a form of classism. Whatever we're doing here in terms of exercising our civic rights.
Police repulsed them and they did not relent. They did not run and get stones or other objects to retaliate violently. They were not carrying stones or crude weapons, as is the case in some instances. They had their phones and their placards and their resolve, and spoke their convictions and documented their experiences digitally.
I don't understand, but see right. Juu hapa hakuna mse amerusha mtu mawe, hapa hakuna mse ameenda kuiba, hakuna mse ameenda kuvunja duka ya mtu. No, we are protesting peacefully. Wao ndio wameanza na shida, wameanza kurusha tear gas hapa na pale.
Always tax country to success. So sisi kama young adults wenye tuko karibu kubeba hiyo responsibility. History inatuuma. Juu maparo wetu washakapitia, hata wana nguvu ya kukua hapa.
Whatever life I want to have, I want it to be good and favorable for me and other people around me and my small siblings, that they may have a good life growing up.
Vote for the right person in 2027. We are out there looking at who's president. We should focus on who's the MP.
Because I'm tired. Nimechoka. Punde imechoka. Na ndio maana tuko kwa streets.
Some of the conveners of the demos, including activist Boniface Mwangi, were arrested. Protesters who were arrested were held at the Central Police Station. And while some were in police custody, they went on to display the unconventional and different way of protesting. That the protests are being held in a different manner and the protesters having no political affiliation, as they display a good understanding of what they want, is a sign of the growing democracy and the increasing shift from the days when the populace relied on the views and voices of the big boys and girls to act upon. Melita Olitenges, NTV.
Well, as they would like to say, the ground beneath has shifted. But so what next after the government's concessions to significant issues in the Finance Bill 2024? That is the question being raised, as according to the National Assembly's Finance Committee, the target in additional revenues for the 2024-25 financial year still remains 302 billion Kenya shillings. There are a raft of new proposals that may touch on fuel that will fill the gap. Meanwhile, it may not be over yet for some of the contentious clauses, as there may not be there may need to be amend other principal laws in affecting some of the concessions. Ibrahim Karanja explains.
Tuesday morning at State House, Nairobi, a joint Kenya Kwanza parliamentary group meeting with one of the agenda items being addressing the contentious finance bill. Once done, a press conference was convened and the announcements made.
The proposed 16% VAT on bread has been dropped. To support, again, on reducing the cost of living, we are doing something about vegetable oil so that we do not make it expensive for Kenyans. Transfer of mobile services is a key concern to many Kenyans, and therefore, again, we have proposed that we do not have any increase on taxation or mobile phone transfer.
These are among the changes to the Finance Bill 2024. The Kenya Kwanza administration has framed the decisions as:
we have listened to the view of Kenyans.
While this is meant to offer relief, there is more that lies under what the Ruto administration terms to be good news. What is key to consider is what was not said at the press briefing. This has left many with questions, as there is the possibility of the ruling party giving using one hand and taking using the other. For instance, the now scrapped motor vehicle circulation tax was meant to pump 58.02 billion shillings in additional revenue. Its scrapping therefore could mean either an increased budget deficit by that 58.02 billion shillings or the reduction of expenditure by the same. But Kuria Kimani was silent on what follows in this case. The introduction of 1 million shillings annual turnover for ATM's invoices and a rise in threshold for VAT from 5 million shillings to 8 million shillings in annual turnover was not accompanied by an explanation of whether indeed it will amend Section 16 of the Income Tax Act and Section 23 of the Tax Procedures Act, independent laws that set the basis for these taxes. The proposal to zero-rate VAT on bread also contradicts the government's own position as espoused by Treasury CS Professor Njuguna Ndung'u while presenting budget estimates last week that only goods and services destined for export will be eligible for zero rating. On the eco-levy now proposed only on imported finished products, questions abound on the impact the same will have on imports, especially those from the East Africa community that are under an external tariff arrangement. But it would appear that in making these concessions, the government was giving out using one hand while taking using the other. This informed by the still standing and unchanged additional revenue target of 302 billion shillings. Some of the counter targets made include the proposed increase of the fuel levy by 7 shillings per litre to 25 shillings from 18 shillings, the proposed increase of import duty to 3.5% from 2.5%, and the increase in rail development levy. By effecting these proposals, the government would have in effect still raised the targeted additional monies, still through increased taxes, yet through avenues and laws with much less contention as the Finance Bill 2024. So, while hailed as a concession by government to retract on the Finance Bill 2024, more light needs to be shed on the silent but salient counter-proposals as a push against an increase in cost of living maintains momentum. Ibrahim Karanja, NTV.
Well, you're watching NTV tonight on this very interesting day where new things have happened, and the question on the bill, the Finance Bill 2024, still getting explored. Taking a short break, we'll be right back. Don't go too far.
New game, Megabox Jackpot. Kwa Megabox Jackpot, winning ni instant na ni kila siku, na unaweza win up to 1 million Kenyan shillings na itakuwa inaongezeka. Tupatie nguvu ya kufanya hii kazi. Cheza Megabox Jackpot, tusaidie na tushinde.
How do you keep your toilets clean? I use normal detergent and bleach for washing. The detergent and bleach cleanless can leave behind yellowness, rust, and germs. Harpic's 10 times better cleaning compared to regular detergents and bleach, and kills 99.9% illness-causing germs in your toilet, including the COVID-19 virus.
Imperfections, blackheads. Try Garnier's Pure Active 3-in-1 Charcoal, powered by salicylic acid and purified charcoal to reduce pimple-causing germs by 99.5%. One product, 3 uses for a pure skin. Garnier Pure Active 3-in-1 Charcoal, #1 in South Africa, by Garnier Naturally.
Everyone can be an expert in his or her field. You can be an expert in all analytics. You know who will be the next star of the season. You can be an expert in all matches. You are an expert in statistics or people's opinions. 1xBet will help you show your expertise. Express yourself. You're the expert.
Welcome back. Time for your business news. Interbank lending rates have fallen to a 6-month low of 12.92% on reforms initiated by the Central Bank of Kenya, which are expected to usher in lower rates for commercial bank loans. Latest data shows that the interbank lending rates now stand at their lowest since their 21st of December 2023 and mirror the success of the Apex Bank in bringing charges in the interbank market closer to its benchmark interest. In August last year, CBK's Monetary Policy Committee approved a new monetary policy framework to ensure banks passed on the benefits of low lending rates to consumers. The new framework is based on inflation targeting and is anchored on an interest rate corridor around the central bank rate, CBR, first established at 250 basis points or 2.5%. And state departments have successfully lobbied lawmakers to reinstate at least 6.73 billion shillings earlier chopped off from the budgets of parastatals, dealing a blow to President William Ruto's plan to cut funding to the state agencies by a minimum of 30%. The National Assembly Select Committee on Budget and Appropriations has approved requests from at least 16 state departments to exempt parastatals under their watch from State House-led rationalization program. President William Ruto had, on 26th of March, directed parastatal chairpersons and chief executives in a meeting at State House to slash their recurrent budgets by nearly a third from the year starting July as part of a far-reaching austerity measures for state corporations in a far-reaching rationalization plan backed by the International Monetary Fund. This restructuring plan targets to end budgets for commercial corporations and maintain to a minimum allocation to entities from July. The proposed austerities for parastatals will largely hit non-essential expenditures such as memberships to clubs for top government repairs and hiring of new staff. And domestic workers are said to enjoy their basic rights and principles, which require the state to take measures in ensuring decent work for domestic employees. This follows the government pledge to having the International Labour Organization Convention 189 and 190 to come to effect before the end of 2024. If the bill is passed into an act in good time, the Principal Secretary for the Labour and Skills Development, Shadrach Mwadime, said the process is on course as discussions with stakeholders are being held. He said this at the 2024 International Domestic Workers' Day celebrations.
We need to take
the Secretary General from Kudaiha.
Sir, we are grateful that you are able to spare time.
Representative from Kapea.
So we'll go to Kisumu, we'll go to Mombasa, we'll go to Garissa, at least touch on all these geographical locations in the country so as to get the views of Kenyans. And thereafter, after we get their views, we'll be able to consolidate the same and be able to now present our bill in Parliament so that the ratification is done.
The domestic workers sector is one of those sectors that has very minimal evidence that we can use to engage the government, we can use to engage other stakeholders for us to be able to challenge the status quo. So we've been working and investing in different research pieces that are being used right now to advocate for the ratification of C189 and C190.
Now, internet users in Kenya are set to experience improved internet connectivity and speeds after Airtel Africa, through its wholesale arm, Airtel Telesonic, activated the initial phase of the 2 Africa submarine cable that links Kenya, Tanzania, and South Africa. 2 Africa is the world's largest sub-key cable network, stretching over 45,000 kilometers and linking Europe with Africa and large parts of South Asia. 2 Africa is implementing a new technology from ASN that allows for the deployment of up to 16 fiber pairs instead of the 8 supported by older technologies. The activation comes just a month after the East Africa region was hit by far-reaching internet disruptions following a cut on deep-sea fiber cables at Mtunzini, a small coastal town in South Africa.
And with that, we come to the end of our session today.
Please come on stage.
The Airtel 5G
on the router.
Yes.
All right. So the one I have obviously works.
Thank you, and congratulations once again. I'd like to data plans. Congratulations, Team Airtel. Run by
Well, that almost does it for us. But before I leave you, the Occupy Parliament protest saw hundreds of protesters take to the streets to oppose the 2024 finance bill, which has sparked widespread outrage that many fear will exacerbate the cost of living crisis in the country. On 12 Minutes tonight, we speak to Magunga Williams, who was among the protesters in Nairobi today in an undertaking that saw hundreds arrested by police. Magunga shares his experience on how the day went and his view on the finance bill. That's coming up on 12 Minutes after the break. My name is James Smart. Please do enjoy the rest of your viewing.
Prepare yourself for Oil and Gas Expo Kenya 2024. Kenya's biggest international trade exhibition on oil, gas and petroleum industry. Connect with companies from over 24 countries, local suppliers, manufacturers, importers, and other industry professionals at KICC from 3rd to 5th July, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Everyone can be an expert in his or her field. You can be an expert in all analytics. You know who will be the next star of the season. You can be an expert in all matches. You are an expert in statistics or people's opinions. 1xBet will help you show your expertise. Express yourself. You're the expert.
Imperfections, blackheads. Try Garnier's Pure Active 3-in-1 Charcoal, powered by salicylic acid and purified charcoal to reduce pimple-causing germs by 99.5%. One product, 3 uses for a pure skin. Garnier Pure Active 3-in-1 Charcoal, #1 in South Africa, by Garnier Naturally.
Mortin Doom, with its trusted formulation, it provides protection in seconds. So spread the Mortin Doom message of how we, you and I, can fight to end malaria. Mortin Doom, Kenya's #1 choice.
Garissa University takes great pride in the excellence of its academic programs and graduates. The University Council, Board of Management, Senate, staff and students of Garissa University request the pleasure of your presence during the 5th graduation ceremony for the conferment of degrees and diplomas by the Chancellor on Thursday 20th June from 7 a.m. The chief guest will be His Excellency President William Samoei Ruto. Cabinet secretaries, principal secretaries, governors, members of parliament and other dignitaries will also grace the occasion. The theme for this graduation is Resilience in the Pursuit of Knowledge Through Adversity. We'll be live on NTV and streaming live on our social media platforms. Congratulations to the class of 2024, Garissa University, Oasis of Innovation.
The moment I feel my pain starting to fade, it's like I'm going back to myself on a really good day.
Panadol Extra releases you from strong pain. Panadol, release starts here.
I hope umeona vile doo zako zinatumika. Usaidizi wetu unazidi kufikia wengi kama familia hizi kwa sababu ya kitu kimoja. Unacheza Loto Moto. Na sasa kwenye *570#, sio lucky game pekee inakupa ushindi. Tumeintroduce a brand new game Megabox Jackpot. Kwa Megabox Jackpot, winning ni instant na ni kila siku, na unaweza win up to 1 million Kenyan shillings na itakuwa inaongezeka. Tupatie nguvu ya kufanya hii kazi. Cheza Megabox Jackpot, tusaidie na tushinde.
This is NTV.
My name is Magunga Williams. I am a photographer, videographer, content creator, basically a digital storyteller. And this is my story. So today I woke up to come for the protest. There had been this conversation going on about rejecting the Finance Bill 2024, and it had been a matter of contention all along. I'm a new dad, so I had my own fears about coming out to the streets today. If anything was to happen to me, because the police tend to get violent during these protests. And I had the temptation to stay home. Actually, for a while there, I thought I would just, stay home. And then I saw on the internet that Hanifa Farsafi had been arrested. And the moment I saw that tweet going up and I saw the videos, I just was like, there is no way I'm staying behind. I'm not letting other people fight my battles for me. And while my son is the reason why I wanted to stay behind, is also part of the reason why I ended up coming, because we have to make a change for the generation that we're leaving behind or that we are bringing up. So, yeah, so I showed up today at the protest. I arrived around 11-ish, and we were gathered down at Nation Center. It didn't take long, by the way, before police started coming in. At first, it was just, we were few, so they sent in just one car, just throwing tear gas and arresting a couple of people. But every time they drove us away, we came back in larger numbers and larger numbers. Up until now, it became running battles with the police. Our goal today was to occupy Parliament because there was a reading of the Finance Bill today. They were presenting the bill. And because I was part of the group that was opposing it, we wanted to have our voices heard all the way to Parliament. But when we arrived, of course, it was cordoned off. There was a heavy police presence. We kept picketing and shouting and, basically passing on the message that we are rejecting the Finance Bill completely in its entirety. But that also didn't last long because this time, the more we were, the heavier the police presence and the nastier the reaction, So they started hitting people, throwing tear gas, and this time they came out with this huge water tank that sprays people. And unfortunately, I was caught up in between running and helping somebody, and the water tank found me, by the road, and we were sprayed down. So we were sprayed down. That thing, I had no idea just how much the pressure on that thing is, especially when it is close quarters, because it was just a few meters away. We fell, a number of us. There were some journalists. There's a journalist lady who broke her equipment, and in the middle of all this, I also lost my phone. Luckily for me, it was picked up by a journalist. My experience today is my experience with basically any anti-government protest. It's never about when protests get violent, always it's never about the people who are on the streets, because the idea for us is always to just air our grievances. But then the violence always comes from the police, which is ironical, because they live in the same country as we do. They suffer the same things we suffer. They don't have any special, place or thing that they face. If anything, we've always picketed for also their better accommodation for them and better lifestyle for them, so that they can have the motivation to continue doing their jobs. But then they are always the ones who come and start causing all this chaos. But today, as opposed to what people are used to seeing, people didn't throw stones. There was no threat to anybody on the streets. We stayed true to our cause, which was to, let the MPs know that we were rejecting the finance bill as it was presented. Unfortunately, some people, our leaders, organizers like Hanifa, Jerry Megui, and the rest were arrested early enough, taken to Central Police Station, which they were not charged with anything last we checked. It was just a matter of intimidation, intimidation stemming from fear. And we don't know what they were scared of. We didn't come with anything other than our tongues and the voices that we had. At the moment, there are reports that some people have been released, but there are still some ongoing running battles with other activists like Boniface Mwangi has just arrived on the streets. He had been deterred, by the way, from coming in, but now I think he's there as I'm speaking right now. I've seen that Hanifa has been released, but other people have not been released. For whatever reason that they were arrested, there's no charge that can stand in a court of law. There is nothing. This is mostly just an intimidation tactic. Well, this would have gone a lot smoother. There had been, if anything, it would have spoken to the character of the president and the police if they had just let people just picket as they had wanted. You are free to provide police presence in case of anything, but you're not free to beat people up. You're not free to lock people up. You're not free to, lob tear gas at people, including people who are going on by their daily lives. They're being harassed as well. But I guess that is why we also have to continue shouting. You see, people assume that simply because we work on the internet and we are always, releasing lifestyle content, that we do not follow the conversations that go on affecting our country. Today, the young people between the ages of 18 and 35 are the majority that came out today. We, the people who have always been seen as just, internet people, we came out and organized a march. And that also speaks to how much people are tired. People who would rather just be going on their daily lives, creating content, just having fun with people. Today they left all of that. They risked all of their livelihoods because we depend on corporate sponsorship to make our living, but I hope there is nobody out there or any corporate out there that would come and ban or remove people from, from their marketing simply because they were out here, And I'm actually also, by the way, very happy to the CBD business community because it is them who gave us support. They're the ones who gave us water and masks and sometimes also let us, get refuge in their places of business when the police came, running around. We will continue the fight. We would rather be doing other things, by the way, but there are things that you cannot ignore. So when we will be called upon to come back, we will be back. It is kind of funny that people expect Gen Z, the people who are just after high school, the much younger generation to not be concerned about politics. But then history tells us otherwise. The likes of Tom Mboya, who were trade unionists by the age of 20, people, our heroes started their struggles when they were quite young. They did not start when they were 40 or 30. So it does not actually come out as a surprise to me that young people are the ones who are leading this charge. The other thing is the opposition is not just the party that lost elections in the last general elections. The opposition is us, the people. So we do not need anybody or any politician to come up and tell us what to do and to mobilize us. We've never really needed that kind of permission or drive from other people. We can mobilize ourselves and make our voices known. The downside of always relying on other politicians to be the ones to take center stage is always the notion that, oh, these guys are being sponsored by this political party. It can be, oh, Jubilee, Azimio, or ODM. Now there is no excuse like that. There's no excuse that you can give for today's occurrences other than the immaturity of the police and the insecurity of the people who command them. We came out to say what we had to say. We came to speak our own minds. Nobody made that mind up for us. I thought I would just stay home and, support the cause from afar. But, my wife knew I was going to come. She knows this was going to happen. So the best she could do is to give me her blessings and keep me in her prayers. I know it's not. It is kind of daunting, to have your partner go out there into the streets. But and actually, this was a point of conversation as well, because there was a point where people were like, your parents, you do not risk this. Consider your children, but it is our children who you are considering. As for my siblings, those ones are Menizoea. They know that when something like this comes about, then I will most likely be there. Yeah, it's not my first protest ever. It's not. So, and it will not be my last one. I think the biggest role that we can do after elections is to actually keep leaders accountable. That is literally our most important job beyond the polls.
This is NTV.
Nothing should come in the way of how you enjoy the game. So ukibet, bet responsibly. Bet na amount unaweza afford. If you need help, speak to a counselor today. Call 0800 724 835.
Kikohozi cha muda wowote, kutokwa na jasho kwa wingi usiku, uchungu kwenye kifua, afya kudhoofika, tafuta matibabu. Labda ni TB ni ugonjwa wa kweli. Ukipimwa matibabu yapo utapona. TB waishi poa.
Countries across the world are currently grappling with climate change, a situation that has greatly contributed to frequent and severe droughts in Kenya, negatively affecting livelihoods, ecosystems, and the economy. As a way of mitigating this challenge, the government of Kenya has continued to implement drought resilience and climate adaptation measures to reduce vulnerability and exposure. The National Drought Management Authority, NDMA, is mandated to coordinate the management of drought risk in the country with the view to preventing their slide into emergencies.
Get ready to have your mind blown.
Yo, what up, party people? It's your boy DJ Exclusive, aka the People's DJ, aka Bazu, and you are tuned in to Kwetu Mix on NTV.
We're bringing you the hottest show in town.
Hey, what's up, my people? It's your girls, your world of baddest.
Kwetu Mix na tuko NTV, au sio? Lena Bambam, Kwetu Mix kuna ubaya.
From exclusive interviews with the biggest names in the game.
I don't announce. You wait for it.
My mom is my manager. Kwetu Mix on NTV.
To a DJ set that will knock your socks off.
Party people, welcome to Kwetu Mix.
And snippets from your favorite live performances. Don't miss out on the fun. Tune into Kwetu Mix every weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. only on NTV.
Sasa hiyo ni swali au hotuba?
Kwetu Mix, brought to you by Nescafe 3-in-1 Creamy White. Changamkia your potential.
The moment is yours. Seize the day. Changamkia your potential with new Nescafe 3-in-1 Creamy White.
NTV, turning on your world.
I wonder what difference it would make if we knew beforehand that every one of our experiences, no matter